Welcome to the Joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen budget hearings for the fiscal year 2015. I'm going to ask Mr. Bob Mayer, our Chief Fiscal Officer, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Tonight we have two general and administrative departments budgets, the town clerk and the tax assessor. We then have what we refer to as our cultural and recreation department budgets. That would be the library, park and recreation, Penfield Pavilion, the waterfront marina, and the two golf courses. And later in the evening, we're going to go through what we refer to as our not-for-profit organizations. This will strictly be a Q&A area. Public comment is welcome. And let's see if we can kick this off. Any questions, comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go right to the town clerk's department. Welcome, Betsy Brown. Thank you for coming this evening. This department, the budget message is on page 76. The budget request is on page 77. And the personnel summary is on page 78. We will remind that there's a couple of revenue items with this account, with this budget. And Mr. Mayor, if you could find those pages, or Mrs. Gardner, if you could find those pages for us. So the fiscal year 2014 budget was $545,214, and the recommended budget from the first selectman before us is $527,263 for a reduction of 3.3%. Congratulations, Betsy. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll turn it right over to you.
Oh, yes, my budget did decrease this
55
year,
in answer to your question.
Thank you.
and my revenues increased, so I think it's all good. And you should
Okay.
just let me go now.
What's going on with your budget decrease overall?
There was a capital item in last year's budget.
Okay,
There's no capital request this year. And because of the capital outlay for the new map printer, we were able to reduce my maintenance and repair of equipment line.
okay. Are there any questions on the expense side of this budget? Mrs. Gardner, do we have any problems with are all the union contracts appropriately loaded in both 2014 and 2015 for this budget? Yes. So everything's set on this budget. Okay. Seeing no questions from the board, any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, let's go to the revenue side of this. And you said page 55?
My apologies, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, no problem. All right, so we have the town clerk revenue lines. And feel free, Mrs. Brown, go right ahead.
Due to increased activity, I was able to increase my conveyance tax.
Okay. So you increased it from $1,275,000 in the budget this year to $1,315,000 for next year?
Yes. And actually, this year, because we've had a couple of large commercial sales, I'm trending way ahead of budget for the current fiscal year.
Okay. And you don't think you'll keep up that trend next year?
Depends if we have more huge commercial sales.
But what are we hearing in the marketplace? Anything? Mr. Mayor, do you have any insight into this?
No. I'm not up to date on the real estate. I think the first selectman might have more information than I would on that.
Please, Mr. Tetra.
What we're seeing, and based on conversations with the building department, where a lot of permits would get drawn prior to homes getting sold or remodeled, certainly we're seeing the ongoing construction, renovation in the beach area. A number of those homes, higher than normal, are being built to be resold. One of the things we've seen is that for a lot of our seniors that live down in the beach area, if you have to raise your house, it's one thing to have the money to do it. It's a second thing, once you've raised it 10 or 12 steps, every time you take a bag of groceries up in and out of the car is a lot. So our beach area is not as senior-friendly as it used to be, so we're seeing more sales as part of that. Some residents in the beach area didn't have the funding to rebuild their house. It was more than 50% damage. So they had to look at doing a sale. It was also interesting in talking to the building department, they talked about homes in other areas of town also going through some renovation and reconstruction, that being a source of where building permit area came from. All that speaks back to the fact that the real estate market seems to be progressing up slowly, maybe with a little bit of a boost in the beach area because homes are being sold and transitioned because the original owners couldn't do the rebuild. But as Betsy pointed out, and one of the things I observed during my time in real estate and when I sat on the Board of Finance, that a lot of this is driven by commercial properties. That's part of the wild card in doing it. It's not just a function of residential trends, even though that's the number we see and those are the signs we see out there.
How much of this is commercial property this year? Commercial property driven of the 1.2, or where are we
This
going to come in?
month, we
this
had two large,
Yeah.
very large
Just last week?
sales. Mhm.
Yeah. But how much of the 1.3 million, Mr. Mayor, do you know this? Of the 1.3 million this year, can you find out for us what percentage commercial is and what's residential? Does anybody?
Actually, I could tell you that 255,000 came in this month in commercial.
This month, related to those two transactions
Correct.
already? Yeah.
And
Thank you.
if you go back a few years, remember when Whole Foods
Exactly.
Yep.
sold, that was a big boost that year
Yep.
to the conveyance tax.
There's also a subdivision going in the Mill Hill area, so, that will probably show up next year.
Next year. What I'm trying to figure out is, do we think there's any give in this number for next year? In the 1.3 million? I mean, you're going to blow through it this year, but you're going to blow through it because of the commercial.
Where are you trending this year? Where do you think you will end up?
For this year,
Yeah.
I'm at 1.5 right now.
Does that include does that include the 200,000 you just spoke of?
Yeah, that's as of the close of business Friday.
Right, and you'll have a busy spring. Right. So you're going to blow through that number by a wide margin.
The challenge, obviously, in predicting this, Tom, as you know,
Yep.
and your experience, is that when you have lots of littles, you can predict trends, and if you're off a little bit, you're off a little bit. When you have a few major account sales or a few big sales, as we do on the commercial side, all they have to do is move from May to July,
Right.
and you miss the year's, even though the project's still on track, you miss a year's track. So that's the
and-
caution in, you'll see that we didn't trend up to where we were this year. We didn't make projections on that. We tried to be conservative in that revenue projection.
Well, and exactly what you just said is why I was asking for the split between residential and commercial. And then maybe we can see what the split is in the projection for next year between residential and commercial, and see if there's any opportunity on that residential side. To your point, I wouldn't raise commercial, and I wouldn't.
No, it all
I-
goes into the same line anyway, and I
Yeah.
don't differentiate, conveyance
Right.
tax is conveyance tax.
Right, I'd just look and see where are we trending on residential, and if it is actually picking up. I'm just, see
Yeah,
what-
from everyone I'm talking to out there, it's picking up, but not dramatically.
Okay,
So it's up a little bit. And in terms of what you can count on as a base,
right.
it's picking up a little bit. Mr. Stone sales being the exception, where he's planning to have an exceptional year next year.
He's the president of the Real Estate Association.
It's all
right?
on you,
What do
Bob.
you guys, Bob, you're being suspiciously quiet. What do you think here?
I sort of agree with Mr. Tetro. It's the market is decent. It's not fabulous. I think the homes at the beach are actually selling. I think the other homes, for instance, Greenfield Hill, I think they've come down in price and aren't selling so well. The sweet spot seems to be the $500 to $700 price range. And can I ask a question too?
Please.
What was the highest the conveyance tax ever was that we
Right now, it's
collected?
$2.50.
No,
per
I
thousand.
mean, that we collected as a town. Do you
Probably what
remember?
we just did.
No,
apart
No.
from-
no,
Betsy,
year-
wasn't
for the
wasn't it
year.
up around 2.5 million at
Oh, yeah.
one
Yeah,
point?
that's what I thought.
I think we topped out like 2.6.
Yeah, so, okay.
So when we
I
talk
think
about
those days are
non-tax
over.
revenue, being solid, but nowhere near the rates it was in the past, 1.3 to 2.6, we're still at 50% it was during the best years.
Yeah, right. Okay, does any other questions on the revenue line items related to the town clerk's area? Mrs. Brown, anything else you want to call to our attention? Anything that concerns you in these revenue line items?
No, I'm comfortable. We were just very conservative. We increased conveyance, but not overly dramatic.
Okay.
And everything else is basically status quo.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, oh, Mr. Becker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, for notices in the newspaper, how much are you, I know it's an expense one, but before we exit the budget, if you could just let me know, what is the...
I budget $700 annually, and
what-
depending upon, we must do warnings of the elections.
Yeah.
By charter, I have to put in the legal notice for the warning of the RTM.
So the 700 in there is for that component,
Exactly.
and that's all, that basically all goes out to the papers then,
Yes.
at that? Okay.
All right.
Just confirming, thanks.
Anything from the public? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time. All right, we're going to the Tax Assessors Department. This is Department 3050. Do we have a page number on this? I'm sorry. It's one,
The only other comment I'd make on the conveyance taxes, when we did the quarterly review, we anticipated that there might be a minor, if you remember, improvement, but not this major.
right.
Just to point out how unknown and how variable.
Well, you had, to point it out, you're at 1.5 and 250 in this
But
month.
in June, we were at 1.1 or something, yeah, so, but we knew we might be ahead, but like, boom, it hits and nobody knows it's coming.
Thank you for that. 187. Thank you, Mrs. Gardner. All right, so the budget message is on 185, and the budget request is on 187. Okay, and a huge budget increase this year. Fees and professional services going from 110,000 to 427,000. I assume we're getting ready for an assessment. Is that right?
We're getting ready for revaluation.
There we go. All right, Mr. Ross, please. Please, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Go right ahead.
go right ahead, okay. Our fees and professional services budget increased because we are doing a state-mandated revaluation in 2015. We recently put the project out to bid. The bids came in around March 3rd, and we're currently, we will be soon interviewing the bidders. The bids came in anywhere from, I think it was 520,000 to 1.2 million.
Okay. When will you come with a proposed winner of the bid?
I'm thinking within another 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks.
And when would work commence? When would they start work?
July 1st.
How long would it take?
Approximately from July through April of 2016, through the end of the Board of Assessment Appeals in 2016.
So a full 2-year process?
Pretty close, yeah. Yes.
How are we funding this in here? Is this half of what you think it's going to cost?
Approximately.
Okay, questions from board members? Please, Mr. Brown.
Did I hear you right, that the bids came in between 500 and 1 million?
It was 520,000 to $1.2 million.
So why do you think such a large discrepancy?
There are a lot of options that revaluation companies will give you in conducting a revaluation. There are options that will take you anywhere from limited data collection to full and thorough data collection. Depends on the labor component.
And you determined which options you would seek?
Yes, we go through an interviewing process. We go through a process to determine what's best for the town.
Who won the bid last time?
Municipal Valuation Services.
Are they a bidder this time
No.
around? Okay, thank you.
Other questions on this item? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you, good evening. I see your number's kind of midway, 785, which seems to make sense. The last revaluation, if I remember, I think that's right, wasn't
It
it?
was 756, I think I estimated.
Sorry, my bad, 756,000. I remember the last time, I think was Mr. Brown was still handling this. Everyone got a card, and the card was filled out, and if you sent in your card and everything was fine, that was kind of the end of the process, and then there were the people who didn't turn in. Are you using a similar process this time?
That's one of the processes that is involved, yeah, yes.
Okay. And that kind of levels you into the $756,000.
756,000 is over 2 years, first of all.
No, I get it, yep.
Okay. And that gives us some flexibility as to, the options that we can choose to take to follow.
But you'll go to you said they'll start as early as July of this year.
Yes.
So the additional, what are we looking at? See, the additional $317,000, that's enough seed money to get someone started? Because it's not quite half of the total.
Believe so.
Right. Okay, and we don't pay them up front in the entirety, I assume?
No.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple points on this myself. I'll go to Mr. Becker, though. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in regards to the assessments, it's my understanding that some components of that are actually supposed to go through the Board of Finance. We haven't had anything. There's kind of a bid out, and there's an funding request in the budget. Is there a time that this is going to be coming to us before it's officially handed to somebody, and criteria and whatnot, that we've actually heard something on this?
We're basically following the same process we did last time around, when I sat on the Board of Finance here. The Board of Finance is responsible for the kind of system of property assessment, but not necessarily the assessment process or reval process on a year-to-year basis.
What's the difference between those two?
I don't know. In terms of a strict definition,
I don't know either.
yeah.
That's why
The process we're following is the one we've been consistently following, at least in my experience, and how the data is kind of collected and stored might be the overall system. How it's specifically collected, or the reval approach, if you look at the definitions of the assessor's role, that is typically attributed to the tax assessor.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, by all means.
Thank you, because you actually went exactly where I was going. Given the concern over the last revaluation, rightfully or wrongfully, how those appeals were settled, whatever, and the heat that was generated by that, I would like to better understand what our responsibilities are. I would like, and if we're not supposed to, I would request anyway, that we get a presentation over the different methodologies that are available, and that we understand those, and that we get comfortable with those before you agree to go forward. And I'm not questioning anybody's authority, and if it comes back and legal counsel is that, hey, that is the rightful role of the assessor, that's all fine, and I would just ask that we get better tutored on what process you're going to be going through, and how that's going to work. At the end of the day, this is a $700,000
Yes, it is.
to whatever process this is going to cost. And also, there was a lot of concern on the part of taxpayers last time over how it went through and some of the adjustments that ended up being made.
And I think that's why we're taking a thorough approach this time, and that's why you see part of the range, because we requested as part of the RFP a number of different options to make sure that everybody knows that we went to every step we could to make sure that the valuations were fairly and accurately arrived at.
Did we exclude the prior firm, or did they just elect not to bid?
It's my understanding they elected not to bid.
Okay.
A correspondence was sent out inviting them. And
Okay.
there was no return correspondence.
Got it. Mr. Becker, I didn't mean to, but
Yeah,
thank you, because I
no.
was going to the same place, so go right ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think you largely covered, I think we're on the same page with this. And just, you know, I don't know if we're going to get this answers before the time that all the budgets are voted on next week, but I think certainly if we're all sort of on the same page that, you know, over the next few months, with the fact that the timeline seems to be ahead of where I think some people realize it was, so we can kind of get this wrapped up and make sure we do the same thing. But you know, I had the same concerns and watched the same concerns in the last one, and just want to make sure we avoid it. I do appreciate, you know, the assessor and the first selectman kind of opening up that RFP a little bit wider in the net to try to see if we can come up with some ways to avoid it. I think if probably based on how much we spent on the attorneys and whatnot to deal with it, if it costs us a few more dollars on the front end to just get it right, I think it'd be good and avoid some agita for people. So I appreciate that. So if we could just maybe make sure that gets on one of our agendas soon, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think that everybody's, you know, definitely serious about making sure we get the most accurate, both valuations for the house and also the proper distribution. I think there was some concern last time about the beach area in Southport area having what I'll call a difference in distribution of the tax burden. And so we want to go through and make sure that we've taken every step so the residents are all confident that we can do that. And that's been kind of the plan right from the start to make sure we go through that. Just the timing is roughly what I remember 5 years ago. Now, there have obviously been a couple instances of different memories on this board, so I don't mean to claim it's the most accurate, but as I do remember, we had this discussion about this time. Mr. Brown presented something to us. They actually had a bid go out sooner because I think we had to get something back and started, and I think we took some money out of contingency in the spring and what would be then the current fiscal year to make sure that we could lock the price in, and it didn't get pushed off. In anticipation of that, we kind of arranged for a July 1 start this year so we wouldn't get into that same situation.
Well, some early notices have gone out to people, right? I mean, maybe just, is it
When
more?
you say early notices, what-
So, there have been some things mailed out regarding details about, you know, people's properties and stuff that have gone out. It
Not
mentioned to me a month or two
since
ago by a few
we haven't
people.
selected the company to do the appraisal.
So is that
It would
something
be hard
routine?
if they sent something out, so possibly, did anything go out from your office, Don?
if it was a commercial property, there are forms that need to be mailed out to commercial property owners, which are called income expense reports, which are mailed out annually.
Okay,
And are
so-
returned to the office around June 1st.
So people may be thinking that's something to do with it, but we're not actually, we haven't done anything relating to the reval being sent out yet. It's something separate.
It is involved with the revaluation process. Income expense reports are part of the reassessment and revaluation process for commercial properties. But those are the only things that have been sent out so far.
All right.
Gotcha.
The
Let's move
distinction
on.
is from a residential standpoint, you use comparables or other sales. On a commercial standpoint, you're actually doing a P&L, and it
Yeah,
has to do
no,
with...
I
Okay,
think we're on the same page.
So let's move on. Here's what I'm going to request. We would like to be involved in this process. We would like to understand what the bids are. We would like to specifically get a request from the town attorney as to specifically what our role should be in this assessment process. To Mr. Tatro's point, what's the difference between the system of assessment and the administration of the assessment? Okay, because it's never been cleared. We've been doing it the same way ad nauseum for years and years and years. Let's make sure we have it right. So if I could ask Mr. Mayor, could you touch base with Mr. Lesser on that? And let's get an understanding? And then,
There are state statutes as well.
yeah, right. And we'll go from there. And then we would like to be involved and get an understanding before we're committed to anything if possible. Okay. Anything else? Anything else on the tax assessor's department? Seeing none, we'll go to the board. We'll go to the public. And back to the board. Thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
You have a good night.
You as well.
All right. We'll go to Culture and Recreation, and the first one up is the library, which is Department Number 7010. Good evening.
$275.
Thank you very much.
I've got only one copy, you guys, sorry.
273, 275. Okay, the budget this year was $3,576,000, and the budget request is $3,649,000. So an increase of about 2%. Good evening, everybody.
Hi, I have a couple of adjustments to our requests. Can I talk
Great.
about those first? You'll like
Mr.
these.
Ronald. Sure.
The first thing I did want to mention, originally we'd come in with a part-time payroll line item that we've had before, $512,000. After meeting with Mr. Tetro and going over the lines for the last few years, we're able to actually reduce that by what's in the budget book, but it is a reduction of $17,000 for negative 3.3% increase in the part-time payroll, the second line.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to mention, that a lot of our line items are at the same levels as this year, so we haven't asked for many increases. We'll go over the increases. One line we are reducing is postage by 40%. We figure most of our correspondence is done electronically to patrons and others, so we're probably going to be able to handle that. The other thing is we had requested 2 capital items, one which Jim Swift will talk about, but the other one was the security cameras at the branch. And again, talking to Mr. Tetro, we understand there will probably be a town-wide initiative when it comes to security. So instead of us going ahead and doing that on our own, we think we'd like to be part of that program, so you can actually take that request off the table, so we have one capital item request.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now, all of these adjustments are already reflected in the first selectman's numbers, so they're not adjustments
Right.
from
They're
what's before
adjustments
us.
from my request,
Exactly.
right?
Okay.
So yeah, so we're still at 2%.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Can I turn it over to board members for questions? While they're thinking and looking through the documents, I do want to thank the library. You guys have been very proactive in hosting several events through the course of the year. I think there's at least been 3 of them, not just for ourselves, but for the other elected bodies. And I know that's been very helpful for the members that were able to attend. So I thank you for your working with them and getting that done.
Yeah, and Tom, if we have a moment, just to point out that they actually took, I think, Dave, 3 of us, Jim, 3 of us through, and spent almost a couple hours with us on Saturday. Each time I go through, it's been a very educational trip. You pick up a few more things that you know about the library. There's so much going on. But it was, again, my compliments to you in terms of a very well-organized and illustrative tour through to see what the library really does today.
And the rest of our condolences for having to spend time with Jim, Mike and Dave for 3 hours. For hours.
Also, Kristen McCarthy-Vahey came through on one of the other tours, so we've had good coverage. If you would like a tour, I'm always able to do that, so call me up. You still have time before you make your big decision. I'm always able to come in weekends, evenings, mornings, during the day, and that's a real offer. So I prefer you called so I can jump down out of a meeting, but I'm really willing to, open up the library before you make your decision, so that's a real offer.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments on this budget? Mr. DeWitt?
Good evening. Library materials, your library materials have really kind of stayed constant, and I see the first selectman reduced your original request of $600,000 to $560,000. Being able to keep the materials constant, are you buying less books and more online media? Is that a trend? I don't know if that's more money or less money, frankly.
Well, actually, the budget we are now working with this year is a budget we had 10 years ago. So let's talk about first. Average price increases in most library materials is between 2% and 3%, so we're losing on the inflation side. I will also say we had over 100,000 more circulations than we had 10 years ago. In other words, we're busier. People want more books. They want the popular items. They want the digital library, and so we're having a hard time responding to that with the dollars we have. I'll also tell you that digital library items are at least 3 times as expensive as physical ones. Now, that's a publishing decision. We hope it changes over the years. So what we're trying to do is balance physical, print, magazines, newspapers, which are still the most popular items in our community, with those that the commuters, the travelers, the tech-savvy people want. And I can give you an example. Tomorrow we have our One Book, One Town event, our largest event. 740 people are registered to come. That book costs $25. In print, it costs over $100 as an e-audio digital item. So we're trying to balance the physical world and the digital world and, respond to a very heavily used library. And Fairfielders read twice the national average. It doesn't really matter what format. They're using their library, and they're using it an awful lot. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah. And if I might, just to clarify Mr. DeWitt's point, is the funding that I recommended this year is above the level they received last year.
I agree.
Yeah.
Agree. Less than asked for, but above for last year. So good. Actually, 2.3% more than last year. Give credit where credit's due.
Yes.
Just no.
Any other?
Fine, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Can you just give a little background and inform us a little bit about the online library catalog?
Yes, and I have Mr. Swift to tell you about that. You did receive a document, hopefully via Caitlin, yesterday. You received a lot of information, I will admit to that, but that was something that Mr. Brown and Mr. Becker said you might want as background information about what the library does and how our numbers, our metrics, so you get all that. But also there was a document entitled The Benefits of Migrating to the IBM Server, and Jim will talk about that. He's our technology librarian. He handles all our technology in the library, one person. He does a really, really good job, and he's recommending that we move forward with this capital item. Do you want to talk about it? And
Go
you'll
ahead.
have to use that mic.
Any specific questions about it, or?
Just talk about it.
Tell us what it is and why you're asking for it.
Basically, the catalog system is what the patrons see to look for books, to renew the items that they already have checked out. It's what staff use to check the books in and out. It's basically the heart of the whole library system. It's traditionally been hosted on an IBM server, which costs about $20,000 over a 5-year period. It's replaced every 5 years. The town has put in a virtual server system a few years ago, which is much more cost-effective and efficient. We've migrated all of our other servers over to that system. The only one we can't do right now is this one because it's an IBM operating system, which cannot be virtualized. So what we want to do is have the data migrated to a different Oracle database system and put in a Red Hat Linux operating system that will allow us to have a test server and have a much more cost-effective system moving forward.
Are these actual boxes, or is this in the cloud?
It's in the cloud that actually lives at the branch library. So it's not a cloud, it's on the actual internet. It's just within the library, but it's the same concept.
My only concern, my question to you, isn't about the need for it or what you're trying to do. Fairfield Woods, I remember that one of the servers' rooms was located in the basement of Fairfield Woods Library, right next to some massive sump pumps,
Right.
which doesn't sound like the best place to be putting a lot of expensive computer equipment.
Right. It's not ideal, but the physical equipment is already there, and this won't put any extra burden on that equipment, so we don't need to buy additional equipment. It's just going to be using the space that's already there. And we've never had a problem where that water got anywhere near the servers, and the servers are also off the ground, so
They're on a platform now, aren't they?
they're in racks, so they're at least a foot off the ground.
So they're a foot off the ground and those sump pumps are working, but there's no generator there if the power goes out, right?
There is a generator that can be connected manually in the event of a
Okay.
power failure.
Is
It's
that
not-
what we did last year during the,
I think it was 2 years ago we did that. It's not ideal by any means, but we're doing the best we can.
is there any plans to migrate it out of there and put it to someplace that would be, let's say, more ideal?
The issue for us is that Town Hall and the main library are down in the floodplain, right at the edge of it.
Yeah.
So if there was a tsunami or something major, they would be flooded and there would be no point in having anything there, which is why we're moving everything out of there.
Right?
So Fairfield Woods is definitely away from that area, and again, it's not ideal place within the building, but without a renovation of that building, there's nowhere else for us to put it right now.
What about one of the schools?
From what I understand, the head of IT had talked with the school system about that, and they were not willing to give up any space for our servers, so.
Let's talk to them again.
Sure.
Yeah. Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of the library and others who are here with you as well tonight. Looking forward to tomorrow night, actually. My question is, can you just walk us through the $26,000 and the $13,000 and the handout that came? If you can just talk a little bit
Sure.
about the discrepancy
Yep.
and difference in pricing.
Basically, we gave you three options. One is to just upgrade the server that we have now so that it can handle the upgrades to the software that we want to do. It's not ideal, but it would get us through so we can continue to upgrade the software as we usually do every year. The second option is to replace the current IBM server with another IBM server. So it's basically just swapping out the hardware for a new piece of hardware. We won't have any migration costs of the data because it's the same operating system, the same system. We'll just be moving this stuff over to a new server. The third option, which I think is the best option because moving forward it will save us a lot of money in future years, is to move it away from a physical box into this virtual cloud-based system. It's more redundant, there's better backups of the system, there's less chance of failure, and the operating system is part of the big cost, and that's going to be $811 a year moving forward until we decide to switch to a different operating system. The reason why it costs $25,000 is because there's about $12,000 to license Oracle, the database system from Oracle, and another about $12,000 to pay the company that does the software to migrate the data from the current ICM system to an Oracle database, and also to install the software on the new servers.
So given this budget, the plan is to go with option 2.
No, option 3 was the preferred option.
Option 3 is the preferred option, but the pricing,
Well, I think the first
Doesn't
selectman wanted option 2.
right? So that's the proposed budget right now. The first selectman's budget has us moving forward with option 2. That's what I'm clarifying.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Walsh?
I thought last year we had decided that we were going to split out these budgets and have a Fairfield Woods Library budget and a main branch budget. And I want to know why that wasn't done, because there was something when I was going through the budget that I was surprised not to see. So I presume that accounts would have been set up and things like that, and we talked a lot about it.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm just smiling because I certainly remember the conversations, but I have to confess that as far as I know, absolutely nothing has been done. I'm not sure we had the resources to do it, but I'm not sure we didn't because it actually just wasn't addressed.
And what resources are necessary to do it?
Well, it's just more work for the accounting department, but it just got lost in the mayhem. I do remember, I don't specifically remember that we were doing that. I do remember the conversations, and it just didn't get addressed.
All right, well, how do we make sure that we do it?
Well,
If I-
it's
if I-
definitely on the list now.
Yeah, if I might suggest, any changes like that might be good to include in the wrap-up with the Budget Subcommittee when you're looking at changes for next year, to make sure that they're included on a checklist for that.
I've made a note of it, Mr. Walsh, and I'll make sure it's in the budget subcommittee actions after.
So that there's some sort of checklist.
It was not in there last year, so that was,
And I'm not trying to pass the buck to the Budget Subcommittee, that wasn't my goal, but I'm just trying to look for some checklist that says that we make sure that we get those things done, that's all.
I traditionally go through the budget process making notes about what the committee should bring up this, and that's the one that's, I've just added, so.
All right, if we wanted to have that done, starting for July 1st, that every cost that goes through Fairfield Woods, every employee that gets a paycheck for Fairfield Woods, every piece of paper that goes through Fairfield Woods separately than the regular library. When do we have to do that, and how is that going to be accomplished?
I'm sorry, but I was having a little conference over here. The recollections of the two professionals on my right and left is that there was never a formal request to actually do that, that the formal request was actually to provide a breakout and analysis of the accounts at that time, which was provided. There was actually built a combination of the library department with the internal auditor. So that document was provided
Last year.
last year.
With all sorts of assumptions that you had to make because you couldn't
Right.
break it, because you couldn't break it out. And then the question
Right.
turned after you
Right.
presented that document to us was, you had all these assumptions listed. Matter of fact, like 2/3 to 3/4 of the things were assumptions based on what the size of the Fairfield Woods was to the main branch. And then you just
Correct.
basically did a simple math calculation. And we then talked about, well, what would
A
be
lot of work
necessary?
went into the assumptions. I'd prefer you not to use the word simple, but that's
Okay.
okay. I understand.
Okay, but the bottom line was, we had gotten to that point at the end of that evening where we had determined that I thought we had come to the determination that we wanted to, and I'm welcome to any of my board members to jump in here, that we were going to have more accurate numbers by actually breaking it out and having it be its own department. Kind of like exactly the way, Jerry, I think, is going to be here tonight, the way it was very synonymous between the way Smith Richardson is separate than the way that the Par 3 is. So the question becomes, is what is going to be necessary if our wrap-up committee says that's exactly what we want to do?
Yeah,
Can it be
no.
done for July 1st so that every single expense that comes in for one versus
Right.
the other can be done? I mean, clearly, decisions would have to be made and assumptions would have to be made in regards to management of the library and how you assign certain things out. It's never going to be a perfect science, but I think you get, stationary orders and things like that would be pretty clear.
Yeah, and basically, this work would need to be done by early in the next fiscal year, so we'd have a full fiscal year of activity from the word go. So we will address that, and we will report back just as soon as we can, and to let you know that we can probably do it.
All right, and Chris, we can get that on the post wrap-up so that you can get a memo off to Mike, so that Mike's aware of it and we have a full circle on this?
It will be approximately 2 months after the budget process completes. The Budget Committee comes before this board with the recommendation for the next budget year.
Okay, but they're going to probably need to know by July 1st.
We will look at this
Well,
immediately.
April, May, June.
Well, I guess-
June.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I would hope that since it's a joint Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance budget, that the Board of Selectmen would be included in both the Budget Subcommittee to evaluate what happened and going forward, since this is something we do together as a team.
Getting
And
good at
second,
briefing all the boards.
it might help at some point, if that's a formal recommendation for the Board of Finance, that the Board of Finance actually take a vote on that in terms of how we'd like that. So we know we're not responding to just one member of the Board of Finance. That, in fact, is the, if you will, the preference of the Board of Finance. That would also help going forward, so that none of these are missed, that in fact there's a specific recommendation and action, so that's documented to make sure that it's clear and any questions get addressed.
Yeah, for next year.
Is there any member of the Board of Finance who doesn't think that this is a good idea? Okay. Just give me your thoughts. I'll listen to whatever anybody has to say.
I don't think we need to discuss it now. I think Chris, I'll ask that we get any notes you have for our May meeting, and that in May, we just vote
May?
on big items, and then your committee can meet again and discuss your full report on our budget wrap-up.
Great.
But let's do any large items such as this in May, and we'll move forward from there. It'll give them
Do-
enough time.
Am I hearing that we
Coordinate
want
it.
this to become a voting item? In the past, it's been a recommendation,
Bring it-
informal
Bring
recommendation.
it forward, and we'll take a sense of the body that night.
Got it.
Okay?
Yeah. I mean, we have to create new orgs, new this, new that, the other thing, and do allocations. And no, we will not have this done before the budget process is over. So the library budget will still be one
Agreed.
budget. So there'll be some duplication, but we'll look at
No, the
this.
goal-
It's
the goal's
always
to
a
have it-
recommendation for the
Yeah.
next budget
The goal's
season.
in place to have it for actual, so that, as you correctly point out, you can start accumulating the data so
Right.
that it'll be easier, assuming the board votes that this is the way it wants to go, but it'll be easier to build the budget in this manner for the next fiscal year.
Right. It's more information, which is always a good thing. Yeah.
Right. Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey, you had your hand up, and then I'll go to Mrs. Alban.
Thank you. And I agree that this particular topic is not for discussion tonight, but just would add that it would make sense to include the folks from the library in that conversation in terms of how that process works for them, because my recollection of last year's discussion was that, yes, a lot of assumptions were to be made, and Mr. Mayor did a lot of work, I'm sure, with the help of the library, but to talk to them about operationally how they do business now. And, Mr. Walsh referenced stationery and things like that. So my point is to include those folks in the
Yeah,
conversation.
as I mentioned earlier, the documents that were provided last year were developed in conjunction with both the library and finance department, and you're absolutely correct, it's absolutely necessary that it be jointly developed.
Thank you. We'll go to Mrs. Alman.
In addition to the information that Mr. Walsh is asking for on the expense side, can we also have included circulation from the two libraries and volume of activity?
Metrics.
Yeah, I'll just
Yes.
mention one thing. It is still the busiest branch library in Connecticut, and we look at those figures every year, and we're very proud of them. So we're beating Greenwich, we're beating Stamford, and that makes us proud as librarians, and it does suggest it is a very well-used library. And I'll give you a number right now, which is about 250,000 circulations out of that branch right now, and program stats is about 25% of what, so under 20,000. So it's a very, very busy branch. I will tell you that right now. I'll get you the exact numbers. This is a
And you've-
viable neighborhood library.
And you've been good about providing those metrics to us
Thank you.
before. So
Thank
that's,
you.
we've seen those before. So that shouldn't be a problem, I don't think. On the financial side, there'll be some assumptions of splitting of expenses that may or may not be made, need to be made. And that's for something that can be discussed, offline, and happy to help in that in any way that I can. But certainly on the metric side, I think you guys have it, help to provide that information. I think it's a good suggestion.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I think it's a valuable piece of the evaluation.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? We'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Unless, I have just a real quick revenue question, if he wants to talk about an expense. All your revenue lines seem to be down 2 or 3%, grants and such like that. Any
Well,
particular?
State money is, limited. We really have no say in what they assign us. It's based on formula that they determine, and every library is getting less from the state. With respect to something called book rental fees, which is a misnomer, it really is a heavier fine placed on express books, which are the most popular items in the collection. I want to change that for next year. Photocopiers are down because there isn't as much use in photocopiers. We don't want to take them right out of the buildings. We know people use them for tax purposes, et cetera, like that. So that's down. Fines were down last year because we had 20% reduction in our hours. Now that we're back up, we hope that the fines will be up a bit more for revenue for the town, and the board just approved a fine increase of 10 to 15 cents per item. Sounds minimal, but it can add up if you keep your books out overdue. So that's a possibility. We had invested funds.
Sadly, I'm one of your revenue
Yes.
generators.
Some of us librarians could have wings, dedicated after them. The invested funds are really an agreement that was made with the town for the board to pay down some of the debt service on the main library. So of course it's going down because last year it was at the peak. Now we're seeing it go down as far as the agreement goes, and I have actually a list of what the agreement was as far as each year. So it's going to go down because it was an agreement that was made. With respect to room rental fees, again, they were down because we had less hours last year. The board is going to review that policy and probably the fees, and we may see an increase. But I can't guarantee you these. I'm just telling you what we're looking at right now.
But they're down because of last year, but your numbers going forward for this fiscal year coming up are going down as well.
Right.
So we're back to full time. Would you not think we'd see at least 14, fiscal year 14?
Well,
Or are you just being
it's
conservative?
human nature, which, you can't really predict. But once you have less hours and less, say, for example, rooms available in the evening, if you're only open 2 days a week at the main library and 2 at the branch in the evenings, your room rental's going to go down. People will search out other places to rent the rooms for community programs. They may not come back right away. So we're seeing sort of, a slowing and then possibly a picking up. I can't predict it. I
Right.
really can't.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to Mr. Walsh. My apologies, I cut him off.
Following up on Mr. DeWitt's question regarding the income, on the library fines, you're now back up and running full-time. Why are you estimating that the library fines are going to be going down from last year's budget of $92,508 to $83,999?
What I did was I chose a 3-year average based on what we were talking about with the Board of Finance. I think it will be more at this point, but I can't tell you. And when I see year-to-date, in fact, it looks like we've what I'm looking at, when I looked at Munis earlier in the last few days, looks like our year-to-date with fines was 56,000, so we might be over 83.
Yeah. The question, I guess, is, was fiscal year 13 the year that you had the limited hours?
Yeah.
Okay. So that seems like a perfect number of why we'd pull that number out and not do a 3-year average that included that year. Because clearly, when you look at the fines from the previous years, it's $92,000 and change in 11, $92,000 in 12. Then it goes down to $67,000 in the year that you don't have full hours. Then we pop right back up the next year to $92,000, and now we're
No,
estimating.
last year was the year we were cut, right?
So fiscal 14 was the year we had limited hours?
We're in fiscal 14 right now.
Yeah.
So
13.
fiscal 13 was the year that there were limited hours.
Fiscal 14 was the year, we budgeted 92,508. We budgeted that number, correct? Because that's a budget number, not an actual number. So now we budgeted 92,000, presuming that we'd get right back up to the number we had gotten to. And your numbers seem to project out, based on where you stand today, that we'll hit approximately that amount?
Yeah, when that budgeted revenue
Actually,
number was
that's-
put
if you-
together, it might have been put together before we understood the impact of the limited hours. One could argue that the limited hours weren't implemented until June, or decided on until June, so any budget assumptions, certainly on the revenue side, would not have impacted that.
That was June 13, though,
13.
correct?
No, fiscal year 13, so it was
Fiscal year-
June 12.
June 12, I meant, so it has nothing to do with the 14 budget.
14 budget.
Correct.
If you extrapolate the first two-thirds of the year over the life of the year, we'll hit 84,000 this year.
Is that why you went with 84,000 for 15? The budget? I'm trying to figure out how we...
I'd like to say yes,
I'm trying
but-
I'm try- I'm
I'd love
trying
to say yes. Very prescient of me, wasn't it? But no, but I mean, just, we're on,
3-year average.
I can't tell you exactly where we were 2 months ago when we looked at all this, but looking at the numbers today, it actually extrapolates out to exactly where the budget is for
Except
next
this
year.
Except this year does not have the price increase in it, an extra
Right.
10 if...
Actually, this is the first I learned of the price increase.
Yeah,
but-
and it started as of March, so you may see a bit of bump.
Right. As of March now.
Might see a bump.
What was the percent of the price increase? Like
Went from 10 cents to 15 cents.
50%?
But not on every item, only those items that are fined at 10 cents. So it's a little bit more challenging to figure it out.
Mr. Mayor, could you look into this for us, and we might have some room there.
Can I trade this information for some part-time hours?
How did I know that was coming?
The other question I have is in regards to library materials, because that number's been cut for the last couple of years. And even though we budgeted last year 547,300, in trying to close a gap we have on the town side, the first selectman's taken $50,000 of your supply number, correct?
That's
To
what I
try to close that
understand.
gap that you cannot spend.
That's in the current year.
In
the
this
current
current
year.
year, yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what the effect on that has been on the library?
Well, it's been a very recent decision, I would assume, and we already know from past patterns that patrons are waiting much longer for their materials. So in this community, if you see something in the New York Times Book Review and you're a big reader, you get on your computer and you put a hold on a material that's not even out. It hasn't even been published. And that's the kind of group we're dealing with, a very heavily used, well-read community of readers. So we know that they are waiting months for popular materials. We know we will not be buying as much summer reading books. We know we have to slow the growth of the digital library. We have to spread out the pain. We don't want any demographic to hurt more than another, but it's affecting all our purchasing power. It is. So we have met with the managers who have specific collections they're responsible for, and we're slowing all our buying, including popular materials, series, children's books, teens books, digital library. We must in order to reach this target.
Are we still purchasing the DVDs and the whole video collection?
Yeah, and we've been doing that for decades, and it's
Yeah.
our second most popular collection in Fairfield. And we also went and talked to Media Wave because there's been concern that possibly they're our competitor, and they certainly aren't. We cannot buy the volume of materials they buy. They are a retail outfit like a book sale, like a bookseller, like Fairfield University Bookstore. They consider us a community partner. We might buy 2 or 3 copies of the popular movie. We do not buy 10 or 20, whatever they do. So it's really up to the consumer to decide if they want to get that movie right away as soon as it comes out and pay for it, or wait a little bit because there are lines for these in the library, and take their chances. So it's a totally different business model. And they really consider their competitors are things like Redbox and Netflix, but certainly not the public library.
What is your number 1 collection? You said the video is number 2.
Print. So
Print,
books, magazines,
books.
and newspaper, yeah.
Okay, what area has taken the bigger hit, or has it been a proportionate? Everyone's taken
We
a
tried to make
proportional
it
hit.
proportionate. We've tried to we've reduced our movie budget a little bit. We've kept audios about the same, and then we've kept the digital library about the same. We've cut back a little bit on print. It's a balancing act the whole time.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could just go back to the capital for a minute, and you could just focus on this for a second here. So you were originally requesting option number 3, but we're going to option number 2. I do have some questions kind of relating to option number 3. So you're talking about essentially buying a more powerful server, because when we were there the other day for the tour, and thank you, but I had thought that we were talking about the town had some existing servers, we were going to be able to kind of ride off of those, so we were really talking more of a software sort of cost. But it's looking, as I kind of look through, this sheet, it seems like there's actually going to be some server replacement costs as well, or
No.
this is
No.
really an all software.
Right.
This seems very high if we've got the physical equipment already,
Right.
and we're going to be paying a yearly fee, so it's not like we're paying a big software fee. It seems like a lot of time on your end, but a lot of that's already kind of budgeted in. So that's what I'm trying to
Right.
kind of understand there.
The $24,760 is actually a migration fee. About half of that is an Oracle licensing fee. It's just a flat fee that's paid to Oracle for the use of their database software. The other half of it is the company that's going to be installing it for us that writes the software that we use to actually migrate the data from one system to the other. So from an old ICM database system to the new Oracle database system, you have to pay them a conversion fee for that, for them to do the work.
And you can't do that.
No.
You have to,
No way.
and you have to go
They're all
to their
proprietary
vendor.
records that we don't have access to. None of the libraries that buy their software have access to that kind of stuff.
Okay. So so there's really no way for you to even try to take that down. We've got to pay that
No.
out and then pay that yearly and.
Well, no, that's not an annual fee. It's a
No,
one-time
but the
fee.
800 is a yearly on top of
$811
that.
is just the Linux operating system licensing fee, and that's the cheapest you can get for what we're going to be doing. It's actually pretty minimal.
Okay.
An IBM software license agreement is usually about $2,000 a year. So when you buy the server, you get the first 3 years of hardware and software maintenance included with that. After that, it's $2,000 to $3,000, $4,000. It goes up a little bit every year because the hardware gets older. So they charge a little more for every year after that.
And then, but we are going to go on to existing hardware by using the virtual servers.
Right. If we do option 3.
Like they have enough capacity to take another virtual server at this point.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yep.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Just one clear.
Mr. DeWitt.
We're executing option 2. You've got
Okay.
money to do option 2.
Okay.
Right? I'm
Sure.
just looking for that because I'm hearing different stories. So that's purely software, $13,000 of software being put on an existing machine.
No, option 2 is to replace the physical hardware. There's no migration fees because the hardware operating system is the same, the database system is the same.
Got it.
So one is a hardware change, the other is switching over to software.
I'm with you. Got it.
Yeah.
Option 2.
Yeah, and just what I was looking at here is, it's tough. If you look at the 20-year window, it's $30,000 projected savings.
Right.
But we've got to figure out a way then in that particular instance to find, almost another $12,000 in this year. So with the budgetary
Right.
constraints, and I'm just trying to see what the method would be if we tried to take that down a little to find kind of a middle ground. Because obviously over the long term, option 3 is great for us and
Right.
moves us in a great direction, but it's maybe too pricey for now.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Here's, I don't see any other board members with questions right now. Here's something that I wrestle with when I go through this budget every year. And it's more mid to long term than it is short term, so it's not about your budget right now. I've worked in the media industry for 24 years. I've dealt with the migration from print to digital, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And the question that I always come back to is, what does a library of the 21st century look like? And how do we migrate to that library? Because I heard your answer to the question about the reduction in materials and how you had to share the pain. And that's right, as a public service, you have to do that. You can't target. But I also wonder if we're, and I don't have the answer to that, it's a question I'm posing, how do we be strategic to incent moving from one platform to another so that we don't have to sustain both platforms? Because it gets very expensive. And I don't know that the library overall, not the Fairfield Library, the library universe, has figured it out yet.
I don't think we have, and, you know, we talk to our colleagues all the time, we go to conferences, we're reading the professional literature. I can tell you a couple of things about the 21st Century Library. One is that it's not a warehouse for materials anymore. It is that and more, and a lot of it has to come with programs and people staying in the building. And if you come in and you see people taking tests, meeting for writing groups, meeting with tutors, hanging out with the librarians, hanging out in groups, that's a 21st Century Library. It's becoming a community center as well as a place where you get resources. It's also a place where training occurs, and librarians are community educators and always have been, and probably not recognized for that. So when you go into a story time, it's not just jumping around and skipping. That's what I've heard. It's really, they're teaching kids.
That's typically what I do at
Yeah,
story time.
well, that's what I do. But it's really preparing kids to read and actually teaching them how to read before they go to school, and then helping teens with homework and getting them used to different, harder, more complex ideas. And adults, we're teaching adults all the time how to use the new technology. So the 21st Library is really in transition. So we can't like move away from materials completely. We have to balance sort of the demands of the community. We still have people who have VHS machines at home and still want to watch a movie. What do we do with that? And we have commuters on the other end who only want digital. So it's an area of
tough spot.
transition.
It's a tough spot, and the one thing that goes through my mind is you can't be all things to all people. 'Cause
Right.
quite frankly, you have limited resources. You can't do it. At some point, you're just going to have to say, VHS, no.
And we have done that in the branch library. We haven't done it in the main library yet. So we are, you know, moving and inching, edging, talking to patrons, talking to colleagues, and figuring out, you know, how much change can the community withstand and appreciate, and as taxpayers, and how far we can go in the other direction. And we have to sort of lead and then wait and then lead and wait. It's an interesting time in libraries.
Yeah, no doubt. Do you have I served a number of years ago for the Fairfield Library. I served on a long-term
Yeah.
planning committee that they had. Are you doing another one that can actually address this issue? I mean, where does that stand?
We would love to. We have to find the funding for that. We would love to. That's definitely in the plan for the next year, I would expect, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Okay, you're on it.
You're going to have to teach them how to read.
Yes. And skip.
And skip. Any other questions, comments from board members? Seeing none, we'll go to the public for comments on the library budget. Please come up to the table, to the microphone, name, address, and your comments. Let's try not to be redundant in your comments, and my neighbor gets to go first.
Hi, my name is Donna Orazio, 82 Coral Drive in Fairfield, and I would just like to express, first and foremost, my respect to all of the people who work at the library. Community center it is. I'm glad that several of you have made it to the tours, because there's so much behind the scenes that happens that reaches across the board. And one of the things that in my support of the library is, if you're at the library parking lot at 9:15 in the morning, you see that we're reaching the young people, the little guys, as moms come in with their 1 and 2 and 3-year-olds and hustle in to get into the building. But I want to speak to the older population right now. I have the privilege on the first Friday of every month of being one of several volunteers who drive and bring books to the homebound in our town. It's one of those programs that the majority of people have no idea about, but it happens. It happens, one, because we have a dedicated librarian who gets to know these people by phone interview, or their family members help facilitate, and then my job is to bring them books, or audiobooks, or whatever they've requested. But I just want to highlight one woman. I've been doing this now for about 5 years. In the past 2 years, she has gone from being an independent 90-year-old in her own home to a woman who has lost her house, is in a nursing home, will never go back home, and is challenged to read now more than she was. When I started, I was taking her 8 books a month. Now I bring her one large coffee-style, table-style book. But we can facilitate the love of reading to people well into their 80s and 90s. And I think it's such an important component when so many things are out of control for people of a certain age, that one of the things that the library can do, one of the things that I'm part of because of the library, is to allow them to continue to read and to see me and talk to me. We talk about books, we talk about life, and like I said, you talk about service to a community, service that reaches over an entire age span, and I just wanted to say thank you to the librarians for providing that, and I know that that component is a life, just a little bit of a connection to a world that they no longer are a part of. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna, for volunteering to do that.
Any other comments on the library, please?
Hi. I'm Eric Frisk, 2025 Mill Plain Road. And my involvement in the library is primarily at the Woods Library. And I guess, I sat here and I listened to y'all talk a little bit about what the library of the 21st century is going to be like. And it's amazing because I'm older, and you probably remember going to libraries 30, 40 years ago, and it was quiet, and it was dark, and it was nothing, it was musty smelling. The libraries today are changing, particularly the ones here in Fairfield, particularly Woods. And again, I came here to talk one specific thing, but I want to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing happening there. And just take a second, I'm sorry, yeah. The main thing, if you go into that library, I went in there today like at 4 o'clock, right after school. I mean, it was bustling. It was vibrant. And you can sit there, and I know it's hard to kind of react to what's going on there and try to put that in perspective when you're looking at circulation numbers, how much going in and out of the library, what the fines are. But if there's some way that you can come up with the community involvement in the libraries, that's going to go, you can't even count that. Back to the point what I was talking about. I primarily work with the library on the Seed to Seed library. Many people don't even know what the Seed to Seed library is. Fairfield Woods Library was the first public library to offer seeds to individuals to come and put in their gardens in New England. Not just Connecticut, in New England. This is something that a lot of people don't realize, even here in town. Last weekend, I gave a talk about putting seeds into your garden, letting them go to seed, and bring them back to the library. We had 20 people just at that one meeting to find out about that. So that's just an example that I'd like to talk about for how the community gets involved. Those numbers don't really get reflected in what the library is doing, but those numbers are important to the community. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Dilba, and I live at 109 Matilda Place. And I'm speaking as a resident, but I'm also speaking as a Fairfield Public Library Board of Library Trustees member. And I think the points that I just want to highlight are that this is considered a very lean budget, and it was developed with respect for the taxpayers and not wanting to pay more for services, but also with respect for the fact that they really need and desire a lot from this library. And I think a couple of more points that I just wanted to make are that, and highlight some of the library's award-winning programs. One of them is a jobs program. 89 persons have got jobs as a result of the award-winning program. And also, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that we've talked about DVDs and books and the collection. And just to say that there are persons in this community who cannot actually afford to go out and buy DVDs, buy books, buy materials. And so they really do rely on the library for the resources that the library and services that the library provides to not only educate them, but to enrich them. And we do need to be responsible and responsive to that. And I just want to say that we know that these are economic times that are difficult, but we really are trying really hard to be responsive to the population and our fellow taxpayer and residents. And again, I appreciate your service, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your service. Anybody else? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Rooney. I live at 90 Campbell Road. I'm a taxpayer and also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Library. I wasn't planning to come up and speak, so if I stumble, you'll cut me some slack. But
No, I'm kidding.
there were two things that I thought about when discussions were undertaken here about the budget. The digital library. Some of that can't be replaced. So if you decide that we're going to cut some of those things, you can't backfill that. If you don't buy it now, you're never going to buy it. And I know my kids go to the library all the time to do research. If they don't have that access, it hurts. It hurts education in this town. So I know everybody in the town respects that, but this is one aspect of that. Another thing I would highlight is at the open house over the weekend, a number of the members of the board here came and saw some of the presentations from the librarians. The children's librarian outlined what she was doing and how she reflects on the changes in the curriculum in the school, and she changes the collection, based on that. So some of the things she's buying is to help support that curriculum in the school. If that goes away, then some of what the library provides to the schools goes away also. So I hope you can see your way to supporting our budget.
Thank you very much. And thank you as well for your service. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we're going to come back to the board for any final thoughts or comments on this. Seeing none, we're done. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time tonight. Have a good evening. All right, let's go to Parks and Recreation. 284, thank you. Mr. Lombardo. Hello, Mr. Lombardo.
Good evening.
All right, so the 2014 budget was $689,000. The 2015 recommended budget is $679,000. The change of a little over 1% in the right direction, you might say.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're done. Bye. Thank you for your service. Thanks, Jerry. You're good.
Not even close.
What I was afraid of.
Mr. Lombardo, do you have any comments you want to make, and then we'll turn it over to the board for discussion?
No, I think you said it. I mean, we are running a very lean budget. And if you want to go through each one, I'm not sure how you want to approach it.
Let's, first things first, Mrs. Garner, I'm going to ask you my overall question. The contracts, the most recent contracts are accurately reflected here in 2014 and 2015, or no?
Not in Parks and Rec.
Not in Parks and Recs,
In
okay.
the handout that you received yesterday.
Right. It was not the handout, the email that we received. Right. And do you remember that difference? I actually did not print that out. Oh, you got it. Great. I didn't see him here tonight. Thanks. Bob, you can just start down the end.
Make sure I have enough.
Oh, this is a different one. You're talking about this? Yes. Yes, it's just the salary. Jim has his.
Should start at the other end there.
Say again?
Make it easy for Kevin.
Round. To be honest. Okay, let's go to, what page of the handout here?
They're not numbered.
We got police in there.
3 from the back.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Lombardo, I just want to nail down this piece.
Got mine, okay. Okay. Which one do you want?
Okay, so the adjustment is just a $3,000 adjustment, and it would even lessen the, difference year over year. Okay? Go ahead, Mr. Lombardo. Any questions for Mr. Lombardo on this budget? We're going to stick with budget 7050 right now, which is essentially his operating budget. Mr. DeWitt.
Good evening, Mr. Lombardo.
Good evening.
Quick question, near and dear to my heart. Take me through the tennis recreation, what we're doing there, because the budgets, I think, has gone from, in the last 2 years, from us running it to us not running it. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it's not revenue generating anymore, it's a...
Oh, no, it's revenue generating.
I'm sorry, but we're paying, it's still generating revenue, but we're paying a administrative fee, is that right, or?
No, incorrect.
No, okay.
They're paying us. The revenue generation is through a rental fee. And that's why I was able to reduce the maintenance for the summer.
Uh-huh. So I'm looking at your...
Okay, you're looking at the revenue...
financial performance
statement.
document that was provided.
I thought we were
Thank you
looking
very-
at the expenses, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Chris, we were.
Oh, I'm
we were
sorry.
looking at expenses.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize, expensive, then I'll come back to that.
Don't confuse me with facts.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions on the 7050 department and the expenses? Mr. Walsh?
Not a lot of areas to go to talk to you about, Jerry, but one is the area for materials for maintenance and repair. How do we have a line item for that, and then all of a sudden it goes to 0 for this coming year? What's changing?
That's what I was just speaking about.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was talking
We
about one
outsourced the facility to the winter tennis people.
I
That
got it. That's
$10,000
it.
was to
Yeah.
maintain the courts.
Okay. When's that facility going to be open?
The facility, they're hoping for a CO or temporary CO in May, maybe the end of April, May. Then they have to take down the other building in May, and then they build the other court probably July and August, and it'll be completely 100% finished by September. That's their goal.
Great.
Any other questions on this budget? We're just staying on 7050 right now. Okay. Seeing none, let's turn you over to, I'll reference this document. Mr. DeWitt, you already have this one out.
Yeah.
Financial performance document. And I think this will help guide us overall. Really what the Parks and Recs one was, that was more the administrative side, correct, Jerry?
Correct.
So this is more kind of in totality, the financial performance of the overall group. And then after Mr. Lombardo walks us through this, we can go back to the budget book and do a quick flip of the individual departments and just make sure we've covered everything.
Thank you.
So I'll turn it over to you first, Mr. Lombardo, and then Mr. DeWitt, I'll come right back to you for your first question. So
Okay.
go ahead.
The Parks, Recreation, and Golf financial performance that I handed out.
Please, I'm sorry, please speak into the microphone just indefinitely.
The the first page, page 1, is a summary of all the budgets, expenses and revenues, and that includes golf. Okay? And as you can see, I show a net income budget from revenue and expenses that are in the budget book and that we raise. And then I also show a net income for, to show a pro forma of a business, to try to show that we cover the majority of our cost of operations for all of our recreation programs. So the net income budget that we'll be bringing in, expenses to revenues, we're anticipating $1,146,000. Then we show our health insurance, our bonding, and our unemployment cost, and we anticipate a $518,000 revenue generating programs. Now to go to the
Remind us, the big jump in the bond amortization, remind us, what was that for? Which one was that
That's
for?
Penfield's.
That's Penfield's.
Is kicking in.
Okay.
Right.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry I interrupted.
While you're in that right there, before we
Okay.
move on. And what's the big jump on how we get to net income with the budget? Because your net income's going from $859,332 to $1,146,855, and then you have all these additional expenses.
It's the reclass of the health insurance, which was above in the expenses in the prior years and is broken out separately below here. In the
Correct.
third year, in the last year, right?
From a business standpoint.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Because in my prior years was included in our budget.
Okay.
So I wanted to show apples to apples.
To really show it, and this is nitpicking, you should probably move the health insurance up above the net income
Yeah.
budget. All right, and then it shows apples to apples. That's just.
Learn something new.
There you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Then if we go to the recreation, because I believe the question was on tennis. Chris, is that correct? You had a question on revenues from the tennis?
Well, yeah, I don't, if we're ready to take questions, I don't know if you want to go through the whole thing.
Why don't you walk us through it, and then we can.
Okay. On the Parks and Recreation, what I did was, our tennis fees, we used to bring in 27,000. I just moved that down to the tennis concession, where it moved it to 89,000. Because they pay us 60,000 for the winter, and then they're going to pay us 29.
What page you on, Jerry?
I'm on page 3. Top of page 3, where it's showing Parks and Recreation income. This is the detail to the summary pages. So we are getting income of $89,000 for the tennis through contracts.
This is revenue.
Yes. So I don't know if there was any other questions. I mean, you want me to go through each line item? I didn't
You don't
think
need to
so.
go through each
I didn't
line
think so.
item. We just go from page to page a little bit. Is there any questions on page 3? Okay, put-
Page 2 is the Penfield revenue.
Page 2, Penfield Road.
And once again, I show it the same way. Here, because the facility hasn't been open and our bonding is kicking in, we're showing a loss projected of $133,000. But I do want to, we will be receiving a check shortly through the insurance for loss of business for the fiscal year 12-13, when we were closed for the 12 months, or 14 months, really. We're anticipating a check just for it'd be it's $278,000 of loss of business that we net out to. So we will be getting a check for, and then the restrooms that I had to set up on a temporary basis, which is now going to be the second year. So the total check will be approximately $299,000.
quick question on Penfield. Changing rooms, obviously, this year, nothing. What has to happen to the facility for us to be able to actually even use the changing rooms? Because they're not accessible today, are they?
Correct.
But you're showing revenue for this coming year.
Well, we were anticipating that the building will be open. When I put the budget together
Yes.
and everything, we were anticipating the building would be open next May.
Not,
or next
2
January.
months, not 2 months from now, okay.
Next a
January.
year, next January, we're anticipating the building to be open when I was putting the budget together. Okay? That's why the changing rooms, we start collecting the funds in April and May, March, April, and May. So if the
But
building
you
is
collected
open.
for so 2014, you won't have any I guess I don't understand why you'd have 2014 revenue if it's not opening until January.
Because
you collect for the year
we
ahead,
take
no?
the money in the 14-15 budget.
But that's the 13-14 budget. When you say fiscal
I'm
year
in the
2014.
I'm in the 13-14 budget now.
Oh, you've just taken us out, you've taken us out 1 year past our current budget process. Fiscal year 2015 is actually the 2015-2016.
Right.
Next year's budget.
Okay.
So, okay, now I get it.
14-15.
So,
right.
so these numbers are predicated on Penfield reopening 1/1/15.
Correct.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Please, Mr. Brown.
The $298,000, the check that we're going to receive, or
Yes.
we're going to receive, what's the plan for that $298,000?
Well, that would just go into the general fund, whether you allocate it towards the individual accounts that, we lost, but that was 1213, which is closed. So basically, it would just come in and be put into the general fund account. However, the finance department and yourselves account for it, but you can credit my
It would be
department.
insurance. It would be insurance proceeds. Proper accounting is insurance proceeds. Mr. Walsh?
Jerry, so your numbers for Penfield are based on Penfield opening January 1st of 15.
Correct.
Where do we stand with that project? Because I've not seen any plans, funding, whatever. So, I mean, that seems kind of aggressive with the fact that we're sitting here in March of 14, and that we're going to have a building open or pretty much ready to go, but by about a year from now, when I understand there's just a building committee formed and no plans.
The earliest it would open would be, if it was to open, would be May, probably May.
Okay.
Okay. It won't be ready for January. But when I said this,
Yeah.
when we were preparing this, we were anticipating.
Okay. Does that still seem like it's a probability?
There's a probability. Yes.
Probability? That,
I
so
mean, there's
it's
a
more probable
there's
than
always
not?
a probability.
Is it more probable than not?
There's a difference between possibility and probability.
Yeah, I'm asking whether it's a probability.
I'm pointing out that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to be fair to Ms. Lombardo, it's probably 50-50 for May, and a lot of that depends on the design and the actual work being done and how quickly we can get started on that.
All right, and if we don't open, do we still get this money from the insurance company? Does that just keep rolling along as long as we're not open?
No, there would be, it's open-ended right now. When we spoke with them, they may reimburse us for another 14 months of business, and then it would be closed, but there's no guarantee in that right now. But that's the way we framed it. Whether they come through, whether it works out to our advantage or not.
14 months from what day?
From January of 14. So give us the fiscal, January 14. December 13, so it'd be January 14. So it'd give us the fiscal year that we're in now, that I lost business, up till January or December 14. That's how it would work.
So there's exposure here if this isn't open.
Correct.
Pure loss if it opens in May.
So the exposure we have is that we don't get the insurance money and we don't get the building up, and then your revenue projections can't hit.
Even if they get the insurance money would only be through January of 14.
Yeah.
So there's still 6 months.
Where we would lose, if it didn't open, okay, it'd be the 38,000,
Yep.
the $35. The concession fee of 23,500, and the Penfield one of 50,000. That would be the revenue that we would.
But $111,000?
I didn't add it. Just knowing when we bring in the money, because those are the items that are pertaining to Penfield 1.
But there'd be some offset in expenses against that, correct?
That is correct. Approximately $12,000.
Oh, what a bargain.
Yep.
Okay. So we'd lose, so rough number, we're $100,000 out if this doesn't open on time,
Correct.
assuming we get insurance proceeds through December of this year, and the building doesn't open in May of next year.
Right.
I guess my question is either Jerry through you, to your extent that you've been going to these meetings, or to the first selectman. When would we have to have a shovel on the ground to have this thing open? By May 1st or May of 15?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
a,
we're
that's
starting
that's
to
a
close in
hard
on
one-
that.
Yep, that's a hard one to ask when the design hasn't been finalized yet.
I understand, but we're getting to the point, at least from my limited experience in commercial real estate and representing clients and going through the process, that we are getting very close to, like now, if we don't have plans on the table, to getting that done. I mean, I suggest we're starting to, pretty soon, we're going to have to concede that we can't get it done on time, especially with having to build during the winter, all that other stuff that goes into it. So you'd also have to get it through town bodies. I mean, this is going to be a lengthy process, and I think that we have to at least start acknowledging that before our bodies, that the chances of getting it done seem to be not probable at this point, but maybe just possible.
Yeah, and I think that's what we had said earlier, but no, you're correct in terms of pointing out that every month here, getting it done within that time frame gets tougher. The only positive is that we're not starting from scratch like many of your commercial projects. The real question then becomes, based on the construction methodology and what the repairs exactly sort out to, how long that construction process is. All right. At this point, you're right, we don't have that answer. So as soon as we get that, we'll make sure everybody's aware of it.
It just makes sitting here budgeting on that line item on a possible number difficult.
On the expense side.
Yeah.
Yes.
On the
On the revenue side.
On the revenue side.
Because if we don't know
No.
we're definitely going to get it or not, I guess I'd feel better if I knew that there had been an approved plan, that things were moving forward, that whatever, but sitting here
Well, they are
now-
moving forward. They're presently going out for RFPs and things of that nature. That has, they put that in motion already. They haven't reviewed anything yet, but they've.
They don't have a plan yet, no.
No, that's for the people that will develop the plan, correct.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
One other question I have in regards to your beach sticker numbers. I thought I was reading that there was a thought of having either day passes for out-of-town residents or something go up dramatically. Is that just not passed, or is?
No, it went up.
Okay, where would I see that increase? Is that listed on page 4?
It would be under,
Beach stickers is page 4.
I'm looking at beach stickers on page 4, and I just looked at the top, and I just didn't see any change in the numbers.
the reason being is we went up from $15 during the week to $20 for for anyone without a sticker, and from $25 on a weekend to $50. And that's in line with our surrounding communities. That the reason I didn't increase it twofold is I don't know if we're going to garner that many more vehicles.
You might lose
We're going to
vehicles.
lose vehicles.
Yeah.
We may lose vehicles, okay? So I left it until I get a benchmark under my belt to, after a year, I can say where we went with our numbers, how many cars we brought in, et cetera. Because we do keep
What
counts.
percentage did you raise it?
50% on the weekend.
Weekend.
100%.
Or 100% on the weekend.
And you left it flat here.
Yeah, because I don't know whether we're going to bring in more money. I wasn't going to be...
There's an artful.
I mean, I was
term.
down at the gate on the 4th of July, and people were balking at the 25. They were turning around.
Okay.
Okay? And I saw it firsthand. Okay? And there are people that balk. So I wasn't going to tell you I was going to bring in X more money and not do it. So I played it very conservative.
The artful term for that is called sandbagging.
Well, I'd like to bring in the revenue.
I had Mr. DeWitt, then I had Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey, and then I have Mr. Brockfeld. If you're done, Mr.
I'm done.
Walsh. We'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Yeah, just a point of clarification for Selectman. So there's no options on the table right now for a brand-new construction of Penfield. We're in fix-it rather than replace it. Is that correct?
The building committee has the option to go back and recommend that. Everything I've heard to this point, both from the engineers, our DPW folks, and the building committee, is that there's a lot worse saving in the structure as it has been. It'll come out to a, for lack of a better term, a business decision based on what the cost of different options are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, and thanks, Mr. Lombardo. The decision to raise the daily parking rates, was that simply an economic one, or were there other factors that weighed into?
No, we were getting, it wasn't strictly economics. It was the number of out-of-towners using our facilities, trying to make way for more residents to have parking. And we also looked at the metrics of the surrounding towns, of what they pay and or what they charge, and we fit into that.
So this decision brought us more in line with the surrounding towns?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brockfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I was curious, is there a misprint on here, or am I reading it wrong? Beach stickers, resident taxpayer, $55, beach sticker, non-resident, $45? Is that, I'm just curious, is that correct? It's,
Let's see, resident, which one, resident taxpayer?
yeah, beach stickers, resident taxpayer, $55.
Right.
Beach stickers, non-resident, $45? We charge less to a...
I think that's a town employee. It's a
Oh,
town
okay.
employee.
Okay. No
Non-resident.
problem. Thank you.
Good catch.
I was going to move out of town just...
No, that's what it is. It's a town employee, non-resident.
I'll give you the 10 bucks.
Okay, anybody else? Let's, what I want to do is take a quick flip through this. So we did this summary, okay, all budgets. Penfield Complex, right, on the, I'm just on the P&L sheet, okay? On the
Page
P&L
2.
sheet, page 2. Okay, any other questions about this? We discussed the issue with if Penfield doesn't open. Okay, any other questions on the P&L or any of the fees or anything on this? Okay, let's flip to Parks and Recreation, page 3. Any questions, comments, concerns on this? Notice the tennis concessions going up with the new agreement.
Right. As I said that earlier, I moved the summer tennis fees from line 1 down to that because it's all one number now.
Any questions on this? We'll turn the page. We'll go to Waterfront. Okay, we talked about beach stickers, talked about daily parking. The other fees, are they in line with the surrounding communities as well?
Yes. Yes, they
They're
are.
all in line, so you've done a market scan, and we're not underpricing ourselves.
Not this year, we didn't do the mark, but last, it was a year ago, I believe, we did it. And we didn't review the marina fees this year, but we will be moving forward.
Okay. Any questions on this? We'll turn to the next page, which is H. Smith Richardson. Again, we're looking at the profit and loss statement. And we continue on our 10-year plan here, correct?
Yes.
And we,
Well, that was out of the non-recurring.
that's correct. We
Right.
approve that, and you continue to work towards that.
Mhm.
Okay, any questions on this budget? Go ahead, Mr.
If this
DeWitt.
were true P&L, we would probably have the capital expenses in here, including non-recurring capital, no?
Well, they
That
would
is in
be
the bonding.
P&L, though. They would be, that's a balance.
Because
sheet
it's
item.
not recurring?
That's
Oh,
correct.
okay.
But it is in there.
In the bond amortization.
It's in the bonding amortization. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And so Smith Richardson is profitable and is actually estimated to be more profitable next year than this year, and that's an all-in number.
Correct.
Okay, the Dickman Par 3, oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Albin.
Quick question. I asked this last year, Mr. Lombardi. Why is it that a senior non-resident can pay less for a season pass to play golf in Fairfield than an adult resident must pay? The adult resident's senior pass is $360, and the non-resident senior is $250. So if you're a senior citizen living in some other town, you can buy a season pass to Smith Richardson for less than a tax-paying resident in Fairfield does.
Yeah. The 360 is 7 days a week.
Okay?
The senior non-resident is 5 days a week.
So it's Monday through Friday?
Correct.
Okay.
If they wish to buy it, then they would pay the $500 fee if they want to golf 7 days.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All set? Okay. I'll note for everyone's notice that the Dickman Par 3 is essentially break even. It's due to make about $13,000, all things being equal. Quick question, Mr. Lombardo. Number one, you started this format last year on the P&L, and I want to thank you for that. I think that's a good improvement, and it's been very worthwhile, at least from my standpoint. I think, based on what others have said, they agree. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the study you did of the golf courses in the past year? Because there's a lot of questions over should the town be in the golf course business, and I know that you guys have undertaken some studies on that. And
Yeah. I'll do it from memory because I don't believe I brought my program with me. Yes, the Golf Commission undertook and did an analysis of whether we should outsource the course. We've met with several individuals, companies that do it. And we came up with, and I'm just doing this from memory, so please, one is outsource, and it was only outsourcing the maintenance. That's the area that we looked at, is outsourcing the maintenance of the facility. We looked at having a company come in and do it. We also looked at reducing the number of full-time employees that we have at our facility. I'm trying to think. Thought I brought.
if you don't have it, could you forward to it? Give us just the conclusions of what you came up
Right
with.
now, because we have a union in town, we're meeting with HR, and we'll be meeting with the unions and negotiating the best way to proceed. I guess that's the way to put it, and to see where we can come up with a balance of whether we should proceed or not.
So the entire process is still under evaluation.
Oh, yes.
as to how you manage the golf course. Why, just curious, why did you limit it to just the maintenance on the golf courses, if you could explain that?
I don't know if you've read the paper in Hartford Current. There's a lot of courses that have outsourced and had bad experience. And I'll give you an example. I believe it was in Hartford and East Hartford, I believe it was, had 2 courses. And they ended up canceling it, at the end of the contract, canceling it. And the community had to put $5 million back into capital money, back into the course to bring it up. Because when you outsource, there's only one area basically to save money. And that's in employment. Okay? In employment.
Okay.
Okay, and, so they, if you don't oversee it and really, and it's tough when you have a contractor, they do it. So I wasn't 100% sure. We're not going into this because we have a poorly maintained golf course. We're doing it because the RTM and the Board of Finance had wanted to know some answers, and that's why we're moving forward with it. And also to try to save money as fees go up, and we want to keep our revenue stream building. And we have other improvements that we want to do, such as the clubhouse and surrounding, infrastructure to our golf course. So we're looking at trying to level the playing surface if we can, in the sense of providing the community with the best facility, as well as trying to keep our cost level. You may know that Westport recently did it. They just outsourced their maintenance. Okay? They had to. They had a maintenance issue. Okay? So that was the balancing act. Plus, we have a no layoff clause within our union.
Okay.
So we feel that, we could work with the union and come up with, hopefully, negotiate something to work for everybody. That's what we're looking at.
Questions from board members? Mr. Walsh.
And I guess at some point in time, maybe we can get a presentation in executive session to the extent that it involves something to do with the union, or whatever. But I will tell you, I kind of agree with at least the theory of just being the maintenance department. I mean, at the end of the day, if the quality of the golf play or the quality of our course is going down because some outside organization is trying to save money and is basically not doing as much repairs as we want them to do, or should be doing, or arguing with them about it, really the golfers are going to be complaining to the first selectman and us as elected officials, and we could be in a contract for 5 years. I mean, what I do like about the current system is that we can go to you, Jerry, or more importantly, to our superintendent of golf course who's in the back, and I like the fact that they have to come before us and we can ask them questions.
Right.
And that we have somebody looking out for it on behalf of the town. So it concerns me that other towns have had problems with it, but I think instead of doing it all, I would like there to be somebody that has to come before us and has to, in the end, report to the first selectman, who can deal with these issues as they come up. So that's just my feeling about it, and I'm just concerned about it. And I think we should take it up at another time.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anyone else? I wanted to make sure that the board was aware that the Golf Commission was looking at any and all options. They came before us a number of years ago, it must be 3 or 4 years ago now, with a 10-year plan. We've largely supported that plan through thick and through thin. There's been substantial improvement in the golf courses. There's been profitability in the golf courses. And I respect the fact that they continue to look at what their options are and are taking a proactive approach. And I just wanted to go on the record with that. So I thank them and yourself and Mr. Grace in the back for doing that. And I'm sure we all do. And I'll go to Mr. Stone.
Not to belabor this, because we have to move on, but have there been any success stories?
In a private setting, I think you have better success stories. When it's privately owned, I am sure that there's success stories, but I still have concerns about releasing control. That's the big thing, is releasing control when you outsource entirely. Okay? We saw what happened in Bridgeport. That's close to home. Okay? But it's not to say it can't work. Okay? You have to put the safeguards in place. I think we're a little bit more proactive in that, I myself or Peter or whoever we put, whoever I have overseeing the contract. And, so I mean, we're a little more proactive than other communities when it comes to that. So I think that we, just need to study it and make sure when we make a decision, that it's the right one.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that briefly, part of Jerry's concern comes from, as all of us would, that there are more rounds played at Smith Richardson than your typical golf course. So if you get off sync or out of kilter on maintenance, it's going to show up much faster there than other courses. You typically have, most courses will have a day off during the week. Smith doesn't. Most courses aren't playing 45,000 rounds a year, as Smith is. So that's part of this sensitivity to maintenance, because it doesn't take long for it to get out of sync if we're not keeping up with that.
And to follow up on Mr. Flynn's point, we have made a major investment over the last 10 years. It's been a major investment, and we've committed to it. And I don't want to see someone else take it over and all that 10 years go down the drain pretty fast, because someone's just not upkeeping the stuff that we had done, the drainage of these bunkers, the drainage systems, the irrigation systems. So I know I'd prefer that at least there be somebody on the town side who's monitoring that and protecting that for the town, that investment that we've made.
Right. I just want to make one comment. You mentioned about the support and for the non-recurring capital and the investment. And one thing that we've always stressed, that we would bring more income in on the golf carts, because one thing we never did was, because we had to get the drainage and everything. And if you'll notice, we do have an increase. Not only did we increase it by $1, but we're getting the carts out there.
Almost,
we will as soon as we open the golf course.
almost makes up for the sandbagging you're doing on the daily parking fees.
Hey, I got to work it somehow.
All right. With that, let's turn back to the budget book and take a quick flip, and I'll open it up for public comment in each of these specific areas. We covered a lot of it. That was very good. But I'm going to turn to page 280 and 281, which is the Penfield Pavilion Complex. Let's not revisit what we've already done, but are there any questions or comments from board members on this budget? Okay. Seeing none, I'll go to the public. Anything on Penfield? Seeing none, we'll go to the next budget, which will be the waterfront and the marina, 7070. Any questions or comments on this budget? This is pages 286 and 287. Seeing none, I'll go to the public. None, back to the board, okay. We'll go to the Carl Dickman Golf Course, page 288 and 289. Modest increase of $1,000 or $3,000 here. Questions, comments from board members on this one? Good evening, Mr. Grace.
Good evening, Mr. Flynn.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public on the par 3 golf course. Nothing. We'll go to Smith Richardson, which is page 291 through 293. There's about a $60,000 increase here. What's the driver of this increase?
The increase is approximately $41,000.
Yeah.
17,000 of it is capital,
Thank you. Yep.
and the rest is basically contractual, 17,000 in the salary and overtime, and the golf carts and the pro contract went up approximately total $4,000.
And we did get did we get a written opinion from the town attorney about the golf course, the golf cart contract that we had a question on previously?
Yeah, I don't believe you got a written opinion. We just had a presentation on that at one of the more recent Board of Selectmen meetings, so we can get that summarized in a written opinion back to you.
Please do. Thank you. Any other questions on the golf course? Mr. Brown?
Just on the capital outlay. You asked for $68,000 for a heavy-duty utility vehicle. First Selectman offered $17,000.
No, that was, there was, we also asked for another piece of equipment that we declined.
Yeah, there was two pieces of equipment that we were asking for.
Yeah, there was one 23,000, you got 17, one
Right.
45, and you got nothing.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the 17,000,
Okay, I
we
see
can
that.
get the vehicle that we want. Or,
Ken, okay.
Instead of the Cadillac, we'll go for a Volvo.
Get the Volvo?
Yes.
You might have to go to a Ford.
Volkswagen.
but, yeah, so we can get what Peter needs to operate for the $17,000.
The golf carts aren't Cadillacs, are they?
No.
Oh, good.
That's a question about the main.
No, the
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
Peter, on the capital out, or Jerry, be both of you, on the capital outlay, last year's budget, you got everything cut, 0. Are we falling behind, because we've been falling behind on DPW equipment, are we falling behind in regards to the equipment that you need to properly run the golf course?
No, it wasn't cut last year.
Yeah.
Okay, because we were doing the analysis, and we
Okay.
didn't know when we were going to be doing it,
Mhm.
if we were going to be doing it. So I elected not to ask for these pieces of equipment. And then this year, okay, knowing that we're not going to be entering it, right away, and plus I found out that a lot of the capital equipment, if you do outsource, you'd still be responsible for.
Okay,
So we're going forward with this.
all right.
I think that's a compliment to Mr. Lombardo in terms of how he looked at things and didn't put in even the requests last year based on where they were in the evaluation.
As well as Mr. Grace.
If he's the one.
All right,
Have a good mechanic.
there you go. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the public on the Richardson Golf Course. And there's nothing there. We'll come back to the board real quick. I just want to highlight, there's another document that Mr. Lombardo prepared, which is the revolving fund financial performance. I don't think we need to go through this ad nauseum. It's on each of the individual park and rec programs. It's basically a profit and loss statement by program.
Correct.
And it shows that for the year, the programs collectively made $11,000, which sits in that separate revolving fund. So that fund balance has gone from $140,000 till, as of last September, $151,000.
That's correct.
And what is that, is there any planned utilization of that fund at this point?
Well, as you recall, I have, 5 years ago, the board gave the approval to retrofit the new Beanery tennis area that we're going to be doing, and we're going to be spending that money this year, approximately $60,000.
Right.
Of the items that we wanted that the Fairfield Indoor Tennis wasn't going to be providing us. So we'll be spending that money out of this, and then we're looking to increase some of our rates. So next year there'll be monies hopefully coming back to the community on that.
Excellent. And you're sunsetting or evaluating programs that are losing money?
I'm sorry?
You're sunsetting or evaluating programs that are losing money for whether you should continue doing them or not?
Yeah, there are some programs that I run, okay, that we know loses money.
Yep.
Okay. Whether we're not getting the attendance or something, then we would reduce it. But most of our programs,
I just want to know that someone's evaluating.
oh no, we evaluate them, we look at them, and, we're also looking at saving, not only that, but our expenditures. And I'll give you an example. We're looking at, we send out that brochure, that nice brochure. Took a while for the staff to bang it over my head, but we're looking to reduce the number and not send them out as much, have them in the library, have them in the town hall, our building, and do it. We have put it on the internet as we do now, because
Great.
most people are doing that.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, anything to the public? None. Mr. Lombardo, thank you very much. Mr. Grace, thank you for coming. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
gentlemen
Thank you.
again. Have a good one.
Something's not right. I'm going home at 9:30?
Yeah, well. Could stay later if you'd like.
No, thank you.
All right,
Careful
we're-
what you ask for.
Yeah. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll go into our not-for-profit question and answer session. And I will open that up for public comment, and we'll be right back. Thank you, everyone.
I know. I got too many of them. I got too much of my.
Yeah, I'll just do a flip. Conduct our budget meetings. And it was determined that for the area of the discussion of the not-for-profit partners that the town gives funding to, there wouldn't be any specific presentations. It would be a question and answer format, where we would go page by page through the book, flipping the pages, and if any board members ask questions, we would ask that the organization come up and answer those questions. To the extent that any organization would like to say something brief, they can do so when we have public comment. Many of us have been on this board for a long time. We're very familiar with the hard-working, good work that the not-for-profit organizations do. We're also very aware that we're partners with you, and that in many instances, in fact, most instances, the not-for-profit organizations provide services to the townspeople that if they didn't exist, the town might have to provide to themselves. So please don't feel slighted at all in the fact that we're not going to have formal presentations at this time. It's just in an effort to save time, and in the fact that we go through about 12 of these budget hearings during the month of March. We thank you for your efforts. We thank your organizations for everything they do for the townspeople. And we appreciate the partnership that we share with you. In addition, there was a not-for-profit committee that was put together by the first selectman. I can't remember, Mike, whether it was Mr. Flato. It was
Board of
Mr.
Selectmen, I
Flato.
think Mr. DeWitt mentioned last night, all the way back in 2010, 4 years ago.
Our first
Right.
meeting was December 2010.
So it was put together by the prior administration and the prior Board of Selectmen to review how the town works with those not-for-profit organizations. That committee recently submitted its report to the Board of Selectmen, and then for informational purposes submitted it to the RTM. While this board did not get a formal presentation on that report, we were kept informed by its chairman, Mr. DeWitt, as that original committee was requested, quite frankly, at this table by the Board of Finance, and then carried forward by the Board of Selectmen and Mr. Flato. That committee did not have its work done so that it impacted this budget process. So any recommendations for that committee were not enacted or acted upon by the Board of Selectmen for this budget process, or any other town body for that matter. I don't want to put you on the spot, Mr. Tetra. I'm going to. What is the next process as you see it with that report, and where do we go from there? And my apologies for doing that. I did not give you advance notice of that I was going to ask that.
Not a problem. The committee report was presented to the Board of Selectmen on January 29th, I believe. We had a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen. I believe the committee met the night before that to actually finish up those recommendations. So the Board of Selectmen didn't get that report except by email the next day, and then for the discussion that evening. Our board listened intently to the presentation, but also realized that there were a number of recommendations in there that we wanted time to discuss. So we held off on any specific discussion at that point, so we could come back to it. We are looking, as we go through this process and this year, kind of in light of those recommendations, to see kind of how they play out if we had those in place during this. So we're using this as a learning experience, and we will have our discussion shortly after this process wraps up about which of those we are comfortable with recommending, or if we can build on those and perhaps come up with a hybrid that might work also. So
And the intent is for that to maybe be in place for next budget process?
I would think that would be very readable, very achievable.
There you go. Okay. Thank you. And thank you
to the not-for-profit organizations that took the time to meet with Mr. DeWitt and his committee, and were part of that process. Before I open this up, Mr. DeWitt, do you have anything about that you wanted to say at all?
No, I think you've covered it. The fact that we did not ask for a specific comment this evening. So if a particular not-for-profit organization is not here, it doesn't mean they're not certainly interested in the funding. And the fact that we've delivered our recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and they have the action to act upon them for next budget season.
And Tom, if I could, to be specific, the recommendations to the committee were more about the process.
Yep.
They were not about any specific not-for-profit. They weren't about any specific funding level. They weren't about any specific funding guideline. They're about the process to be used in terms of budgeting and evaluating. So I just want to be clear that from a standpoint of a specific dollar recommendation, the committee did not address that in any of their recommendations, so.
Great. Thank you. With that, rather long buildup, let's go to page 127, which is budget 2073, RIASAP. Any comments, questions on this budget? It's $15,000, and it is flat with the prior year.
I would point out that there were a series of handouts that were distributed to the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen that were prepared by most, I'm not going to say all, but most members of the not-for-profit organizations that we discussed in this. And I guess also, as you go through and look at this, is in having had a chance to talk to the specific organizations, this is all about what services they provide our town. Tom, I think you framed that earlier a bit in terms of looking at what we're investing in these services. What would it take if we didn't do that to duplicate or replicate these services for our residents elsewhere?
Thank you. Questions from board members? Comments from the public? Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. I missed you.
Thank you. I just want to kind of testify, as I was here before this body before seeking approval for a grant that goes through RIASAP, and the Fairfield Cares Coalition works regularly in terms of technical assistance. I have a meeting scheduled next week with the co-chair, so this is definitely a service that we are using in the community. The student surveys are going to be coming out shortly. The parent survey was just done, so this is they're very active here in Fairfield.
Thank you. Questions, comments from public? Seeing none, we'll go to the next budget. 2130 Pequot Library. Funding last year was $350,000, and the First Selectmen's recommended budget for this year is $325,000. Any questions, comments on this budget? Mr. Becker?
Twofold. One, just curious, bringing this one down. I know that obviously it's a big budget, but the other nonprofits didn't appear to have been kind of brought down, so I don't know if there was some sort of metric or anything on that end, so I guess that's to the First Selectman. And then on the Pequot side, just any sort of services that the residents aren't going to get at this point because of that, or is that something that seems to be manageable in these fiscally difficult times?
From the top, one, Pequot's, and you get some of the detail in the handout that was provided and distributed. Pequot's definitely a unique and valued resource. The library, frankly, is a misnomer, I think, to some degree, and having had a chance to both talk with the team at Pequot as well as pay close attention to everything that Pequot offered this year and participate in a number of their programs. There's much a cultural and community center as there are library. There's certainly a historic institution in our town, and really part of our town's culture. Dave, and I think you know that from your location. They serve a neighborhood, but they also provide some very unique events and attractions to our town. When I looked at this, as much as we went through the well-publicized discussions around Pequot last year, we really restored all the funding. When we looked at other departments around in our town, and specifically the public libraries, there were some adjustments to those. So I went back and looked at Pequot and said as much as we've been keeping it, I looked at it, how level it had been, but realized that it peaked about 380. So it's actually had some adjustments taken place. And the difference between the 380 and 325 is about 20%. And I looked at that and said, roughly a 20% cut over that time period would be appropriate in terms of helping share the burden of the increased cost to the town. And as I've said before in going through this, we had to find some place in order to keep the tax increase coming in at a 2.6 type of number. We couldn't quite fund everything that we would like to. But I think that that's not to be taken as a statement of the, I fully support the value in Pequot. I just felt that type of cut could be handled this year.
Just on the Pequot side, just...
Mr. Russell, Ms. Lord, would you like to come up?
And thank you, Mike.
So in terms of the impact of the $25,000 cut, I think it's important. We are not sure why the number was arrived at, and it is a 7.1% cut. And it's important to realize that the library has reduced expenses in the last few years, really to the bare bones. We've reduced library service hours 14% from last year. We've reduced part-time employee hours. We've eliminated part-time employee benefits and paid time off. We've had a 0% salary increase for our employees for many years now running. Our health insurance, the employees pay 20% of the individual coverage and 100% of all of the additional insured. And our programming, what we've done is we've really restructured to eliminate costs. Some of our the Friends of Music programs, we're partnering now with other entities to provide quality programming, but at a more affordable cost. And this year we've also had many pro bono concerts arranged by musicians because they just love the performance space and they want to bring quality music to the community. Alex Byer, Dahlia Lazar, the Connecticut Early Music Festival, and the Opera Singers Initiatives are all programs that one of those is a fundraiser, but the other three are really going to be open to the public and free to the public. Other expenses have been renegotiated. Our office equipment rental have been reduced. Maintenance contracts, insurance, utilities, telephone, accounting services, computer expenses, repairs have been deferred beyond really the timeframes that they should be at this point. And our fundraising expenses will, if we reduce our fundraising expenses, then we'll be less able to raise the other $850,000 that we need to raise. So we, in looking at the $25,000 proposed cut, we have to go and, the type of things that we're considering and that the board will have to be considering are if we could cut our books and materials by $25,000, and that would be a 50% reduction. Programming, we could cut our music for youth, free young persons concerts, and our overall music programs. That would be about $25,000. On the staffing and benefits, we could reduce a development position to a part-time position, and that's just a downward spiral in terms of our not being able to raise additional funding. And or we could reduce just overall programming and services that would reduce really our taking our librarian, full-time librarian, such as the children's librarian or the youth librarian, and making it a part-time position. We have considered that we could increase the individual employee contribution towards health benefits from 20% to 55%. But that's, tough on the level of salaries that our employees are paid. We could eliminate the 3% 403B contribution by the library, and that would be about a $15,000 to $18,000 reduction. And we can, on the income side, we can work hard, and we continue to do that, to increase our revenues. And for $25,000 at the average existing membership, it would take us about somewhere between 180 to 225 new members. So it's a challenge, the $25,000 reduction.
So we are more than happy to speak to any of you in detail about our financial statements. And I think you'll see that a $25,000 reduction, there is no fat in the financial statements. You're cutting into the bone of the organization. The only comments I'd briefly make is that the presentation that we've shared with everybody on the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, there's one page that shows, and you've seen this before last year, Fairfield's support of its library system, its public library system, which Pequot is a part of. And as you've all seen, we are at the absolute bottom of the list in almost every category in terms of our support when compared to our peer towns, towns with which we like to consider ourselves peers, Westport, Darien, Greenwich, Wilton, and New Canaan. It's important to note that the Fairfield numbers here include the full amount of Pequot's budget, not just the town appropriation, not just Fairfield Municipal, Fairfield Woods, but Fairfield Woods, Fairfield, Maine, the town appropriation to Pequot, as well as all the private fundraising that we go out and raise ourselves. Without that, I dare say we wouldn't even be on this chart. We approach this year's budget season from a zero-based budgeting perspective, which means we know, as Martha laid out, our costs rise. Our utility costs are increasing. Our healthcare costs are increasing. Our employees would like to get a merit increase. And what we say is, okay, that's on us to go figure that out. We will cut costs, we will increase revenue, we will do what we have to do to make sure that what we ask the town is the same that we asked for last year. Unfortunately, we did, First Selectman did propose a 7% reduction to what we received last year. We don't think that's material to the town budget. It is very material to us, and we'd respectfully ask the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to reconsider that and reinstate that $25,000.
And if I can continue. So thank you for that, and I think kind of mixed in there were some of the scenarios. I guess what I'm trying to kind of strike out is what's going to happen. And you may not have that answer at this stage because you're hoping to have that restored. But from a from a personnel standpoint, we kind of go through each budget here and we look. Have you? You're saying that you've basically kept everything flat and moved people to part-time? Have there been, I'd heard that there was like some adjustments in the librarian staffing level. Am I right there?
So two
kind of
things.
clarify
One is, what have we done since the Great Recession began in, call it 2008? And there we could talk to you about headcount reduction, benefits reductions, personnel reductions. The second train of thought was, what have we done in the last year in terms of this budget process? So the budget process, we kept flat to last year, zero-based budgeting, knowing that we will have to make continued adjustments in our cost side to meet the inevitable rising costs you have from uncontrollable expenses like healthcare, like utilities, et cetera. And then if you'd like, we're happy to discuss what we've done since 2008 from a staffing perspective, a personnel expense perspective, to reduce costs overall.
So why don't we do this? We've done this with other departments. If you could, I think it would be helpful if you could show your staffing levels in 08 and kind of show from each year possibly up to where we are right now. I understand that we pay, essentially we grant for a portion of that, but obviously we're looking at your whole budget, it's a third of it. So if you could do that, let's say, can we go 07 up? Would that be doable in the next couple of days as we look at this and we kind of understand? And let's start there. If I want anything else, I'll certainly reach out.
Great.
If you could do that, and I guess if you can, it was sort of blended in there. But do you have some sort of what your plans are if this sits at this number?
This came
maybe
about
like a top 3 possibilities or
3
something
weeks
like that.
ago. I mean, Mike, is that more or less? Well, so this has been a very recent decision. we have until June to produce our budget for our next fiscal year. So in terms of which of the options Martha laid out will we have to pursue, we haven't made that decision. There are no good options, but we can, and when we get back to you with the headcount numbers, we can include in a list of the ideas that we just reviewed, and you've seen our financial statements, so if there are other ideas you have, we're welcome to have the discussion.
So from a budgeting standpoint, you usually get this number from the town each year, and then see where some of your things are trending, and then you build your budget out a lot closer to where your fiscal year begins, which is a little bit different than what the town side does, where most department heads have been, I think somewhere around, September, October, they start compiling their early stages and have it, so
So
you're
that's
not
true,
quite
and it's
there yet
further
on yours.
complicated by the fact that 2/3 of our budget is a variable, right? We need to go out and raise the money. So throughout the year, we're constantly adjusting, trying to adjust our expenses as fundraisers are either more successful or less successful. Economic cycles either help annual donations, but most recently mostly hurt annual donations. So there's a lot of triangulation that we have to do throughout the course of the year to end up on the budget we begin with. It's a lot less certain for us than it would be for a department head, for example, who would have a specific budget communicated to them at the end of the fall, finalized now, and then it's all about managing your expenses because your revenue is fixed. You know where your revenue is coming from. We have a lot more variables to manage through.
So if you can get us that document, if there's any other numbers like the salary, history, things like that, you can add to them. If you look at if you can see they're on the town website, I can certainly send you, them if you want. But you get an idea of what we look at for a town department. It'd be nice to have similar types of numbers to look at, so it's kind of
Okay.
the general concept.
Good.
Thank you.
Sure, we'll go to Mr. Brockfeld and then Mr. DeWitt.
Thanks. Good evening. I just wanted to bring up two small points that are more general than specific, but I think it's important because, nobody wants to revisit last year. It's over. But Mr. Tetreault made a good point that I think is every department that may or may not get exactly what it wants is obviously going to have a persuasive case to make where there's going to be some pain or suffering or reductions. But, specifically, the regular library, or the main library's budget, there was reductions from what they requested by Mr. Tetreault, specifically in the materials line and some other ones as well.
Actually, if I might point out,
Yeah.
the reductions were all done last year, and they were not done by myself or the Board of Selectmen. This year, we restored part of that, but not all of the cuts
That's what I
from
meant.
last
I
year.
meant from their budget request.
Yeah.
And so I think that conceptually, it's very reasonable to ask all the library systems, so to speak, to take a slight decrease if there's a desire to, as Mr. Tetreault said, achieve some sort of budget, 2.5% tax reduction. The other thing I'd point out is that
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understood that.
tax increase, I should say, yeah.
But the Fairfield Municipal Library's got an increase this year, am I not right?
They got an increase, but a reduction from their request
Well, I
to
mean,
the
if you want to make
first
this a
selectman.
function of my requesting things, then you guys coming back from that, I can request
I understand
all
that.
types of different numbers.
Right.
I think the better way to look at it is, what's the change from the prior year? Because obviously, the best way you can control tax rates in this town is start with where you were in year one, and then figure out how you don't go higher in year two, as opposed to what does everybody request, and then cut back from there. But
Okay, but,
Yeah, I'm not sure it's healthy to start comparing libraries, functions, or departments per se. I think that to some degree, I would argue Pequot certainly fills a unique role in this community, and we should look at the value that it generates from that standpoint. But anyway, just...
I'm not trying to start a match between the different library systems. I'm just pointing out that there was a request by them that represented what they feel is necessary to deliver the services that they think the town desires or that they think is required. And Mr. Tetreault felt in his jurisdiction that you couldn't get everything that they wanted. They got most or almost all. So I'm just saying that it's not like the Pequot Library was picked on uniquely. At least that's the way I'm viewing it. And also, I remember last year during the brouhaha, if you want to call it, I think it was Mr. Biggers who was who specifically said, look, this drastic cut is unfair. Why don't you take us down a little bit per year every year for a while till you get where you want to be? So I just would point out that was actually suggested, maybe under duress, but suggested by you guys in particular. The other thing I bring up, and I'm just trying to support Mr. Tetro's efforts here to keep our budgets in line. The other thing I'd say is that, Ms. Lord, Mrs. Lord, you listed before you started talking about where the potential, how you would absorb the 25,000. You listed a very impressive list of things that you've done, which seem like a lot more than $25,000 worth. I know you're going to say you have other things that have gone up that offset it, but is there any way you could as long as you're responding to Mr. Becker's request, could you quantify to some extent over the last couple of years the belt tightening that you guys have done in order to try and squeeze your budgets and make them work? I think that would also give us a little more comfort in terms of making a decision here. So, thanks.
Before I go, thank you, Mr. Brockfeld. Before I go over to Mr. DeWitt, one thing I should point out, and I just want to call it to the attention and make sure that board members are aware of it and receive the email, is the Pequot Library, before the budget, the recommended First Selectman's budget came out, did put together a presentation and emailed it to all of our board and perhaps our TM members. I'm not exactly sure. I know Board of Selectmen got it. And I would ask that everyone go back and look at that. There's a lot of information there, comparative financial information over the last several years. And I know that several of us did actually meet with them at certain times to review that information. And for those of you who want to, before the budget vote, I would encourage you to do the same thing. Not that I own your guys' calendars, but I know you guys went to the trouble of putting together that information. So I just pointed out there because some of it's already been provided. So I'll go over to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. And I just want to say publicly that Ms. Lord is an active supporter of our not-for-profit committee. In fact, she's at as many meetings as I am, and she was here last night and was one friendly face in the crowd I got to look at, so thank you for that. Just speaking about the last year, you hired a new librarian. That's, we were spending a lot of time this year on, we're losing head, so you did hire a new librarian in the last 12 months,
Well,
right?
it's a replacement, it's not a new position. It's not a new position. It's a replacement of an existing position.
That did not exist last year, right?
No, it existed
No.
last year,
Same pay grade?
yes.
Okay. One other thing I want to make the board aware of is that one of the recommendations of the not-for-profit committee was that any entity that has over a $500,000 annual budget has to provide a detailed financial statement, which I know you did and I reviewed, and Ms. Gardner was nice enough to provide me with all of them just from the committee standpoint, and there's some interesting information in all of them. One particular point of interest, this seems to be, you've had a good year for your endowment. I think this is, like looking at this is the first year your endowment's up
Since 2008.
since 2008. So,
Oh, maybe. All right,
yeah,
go ahead.
something like
Yeah.
that, right? And I know in previous discussions, there's always been this discussion about, I don't know the number, $2.5 million endowment. I don't know what the total number is, but it is a fact that this is the first year you're actually showing an increase in endowment. I don't know. Are you drawing less off the endowment this year? Is that causing the increase, or you just had a
Well, so
a
the endowment
windfall?
rises or falls basically based on the market, right? So that's why I think maybe the first year being like the first year being last year's fiscal year, because we've been in a bull market for a while, so the endowment's been doing well. Importantly, through the downturn, so one of the reasons we have an endowment is it provides us a cushion when things go really bad, right? So when things went bad in 2008, 2009, we had to draw down on the endowment to fund our operating needs, because obviously our donors pulled way back, as everybody did, because it's really tough economic times. So we got to the point where we were drawing down 7 to 8% a year of our endowment to fund a gap in our operating expenses in total endowment draw. That's completely unsustainable, right? Everybody knows that. Your endowment should be, per numerous not-for-profit guidelines, an annual drawdown of no more of 4 to 5%. That's Connecticut state, right? Endowment guidelines is in line with that. So the last year, we got it down to that 4 to 5% again, which is healthy and good. So if you're seeing a decline in the contribution from the endowment, it's due to us getting back to the 4 to 5% long-term guideline that we've always had that we couldn't maintain in the economic downturn.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is you're only drawing that recommended, suggested 4 to 5% off the endowment this year.
And it's a rolling over a period of years.
No, I totally get it. I was just surprised to see that number go up because I know we'd had many discussions last year, especially about the fact that you had to draw more off the endowment, right? So it is still there. This is, this could be your buffer for your 25,000.
It could be, you're right. But remember also that we not only fund 70% of our operating expenses, we have to fund 100% of our capital expenses. I've got a building that's 125 years old.
And I'll tell you, the financial statement was very good in that it detailed what work you're deferring. You've got a deferred account for money you've already gotten contributions on, and I really appreciated seeing that because you could have just said, well, I'll just pull out the endowment and add the wing on, or what. I don't know exactly what you're doing, frankly, but for anyone who's interested, it's a very interesting document. I think it supports a lot of the things we're talking about tonight. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Anyone else on this item? Hey, I got an interesting email from a concerned citizen who actually had a pretty good recommendation, particularly for the not-for-profits where we make up such a large percentage of their budget. And the thought, and I just lay it out there because I think it's worth some consideration on both sides. The email basically said, hey, for those not-for-profits where you're providing so much of their budget, why don't you get representation on their board? So that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah. It's a great idea. Our board comes with a minimum ask, so be careful which of you wants to be on it. But.
The minimum ask should be 325. I think there's the minimum ask.
We can meet it
right
this year.
So, all right. Seeing nothing from the board members, I'll go to the public for any comments on this.
Thank you
Seeing
very
none,
much.
thank you for coming up. Thank you for being here tonight. All right. We'll go on to Fairfield Counseling Services 2150, which is page 133 and 134. Questions from board members? Seeing none, anything from the public? Mr. Walk. Okay. Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Liz Ezema. I am an RTM rep from District 6, and I sit on the Board of Directors of the Fairfield Counseling Services.
Okay.
And I'm Jay Wolk, and I'm also on the RTM in District 6, and I also sit on the Board of Family Counseling Service. I'll let Liz start.
I'm sorry that there are no members of the agency that were available to come to the meeting. We just wanted to reiterate the importance of their work in the community. 65% of their clients are from Fairfield. And those non-residents who seek their services do have to pay the full amount of their services, or they are referred to other local agencies. I don't know what year it was, but since the last budget cut they experienced, which I think was about 10%, they have tripled the number of clients and services they have provided. Clearly, they are an important partner with the Fairfield Police Department. They work on not only mental health issues, but safety, and I think more recently, we can see a decrease in the rate of attempted suicides. So, we may not have a lot of specific information the board would like to obtain from us. We'll answer the questions the best we can. We just wanted to make some public comments in support of the agency and try to explain to anyone who doesn't know what their role is in the community.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to add, in lieu of Newtown, we, just to state my case, to talk about, it's not just guns that people are talking about that commit crimes. It's basically we need to work on people's mental health, and that's what we provide. As Liz said, we provide, over 10,000 people a year. So every penny does count. If you read your book, it does state we were closed for a period of time for about a month due to Sandy. And is that right, Liz? We and during that time, we still provided service. People came in on their own time. We still counseled people. We do have an emergency hotline that people do call that's open 24 hours. So we're just here to, again, if you have any questions and we can't answer them, we'd be more than happy to find them out and get back to the board.
Thank you very much. All right, back to the board.
Just to be clear, one of the questions that came up last year at this time was that while the Fairfield Counseling Services does have clients from out of town, any of the non-resident clients either pay the full freight or they're referred to agencies in other towns. So none of our money is going to fund out-of-town clients.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Mr. Tetra.
65% of people do use our service here in town. And like Mike said, the remainder does pay full, fee to us.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Page 135. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Which is 2170, the Discovery Museum. Funding request is flat the prior year. Comments from board members, anything? Seeing none?
In this category, there are several of the organizations, as I went through here and as I met with the organizations and talked with them, a number of them are very intertwined with the school district curriculum. So from the outside, trying to evaluate that's very difficult. One of the things we talked about is whether these should be categorized either in a separate group here or, in fact, under the Board of Ed budget, with the dollars transferred to it, but so that the Board of Ed can more properly evaluate whether they should be increased in certain cases based on how the curriculum is going and how different programs are being added to make them fully integrated with that. Because from the outside, it's just hard to evaluate. It's obviously easy to say no to an increase,
Right.
But you're doing that without insight as to
Full
what's taking
information.
place. So,
It's an interesting
looking at next year, there's 2 or 3 of these that I would like to see categorized differently. Obviously, working with the Budget Subcommittee and with the Board of Ed in this case, too, to make sure they'd be willing to kind of accept that transfer to kind of tie that better together.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Thanks for the information. Anything else? Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
I'd just like to point out, it's my understanding that we do have board representation from the town on this nonprofits board. Is that correct, Mr. Tetro?
I think there are 2 things. There are a number of residents from our town that are on this board, and the first selectman is an board member also on this.
Great.
All right? And in that capacity, our, excuse me, our $24,000 contribution equates to about, for 2,000 students, approximately 2,000 students, equates to about $12 a student per year.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else from the board, anything from the public? Yes. Hello.
Hi, Joe DeVanzo, 1446 Jennings Road, and I am the chairman of the board of the Discovery Museum and Planetarium. First of all, thank you for your commitment to the town. Being a former retired CFO, I'm feeling your pain out here in the audience. But real quick, I'm going to be very respectful of your time. The mission of the museum is to engage, excite, and educate. To that end, what do we do with the $24,000? We supplement Fairfield Schools' science curriculum for grades K through 8. And a little warning sign, we're developing curriculum for the high schools. Basically, the $24,000, as Mike pointed out, allowed 2,000 students to go through our museum's assets. We have 2 assets I want to point out that are unique. We have a Challenger Learning Center, which we just invested $250,000 in to upgrade both the hardware and the software. What that center does is it allows the students to simulate a space mission. We have a space mission to the moon and a space mission to Mars. We split the classes. They each get an assignment, so it's not only a science curriculum supplement, but also cooperation and teamwork is also part of the curriculum development. And as I was listening to your comments about visiting the library, after the budget cycle's over, I want everybody in this room to come over to the museum on me. We will split the group into 2, half into the module, half into the mission control, and see if they can bring you back. But I do want to do that. That's something, Tom, Mr. Flynn, I would like you to put on your agenda.
I guess it depends on how I vote, right? Whether you bring me back or not.
Tom, it depends on where they put you.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we get to vote on whether we bring him back?
Can I be in the other room than Mr. Flynn? Okay.
I want the 2 engineers in the capsule.
Yeah. Actually, if you could do, and this is probably not as intellectually stimulating as what Mr. Devanza just mentioned, but if you want a team-building exercise, try that zip lining.
Well, what we will do is we'll put you in the mission center in the morning, serve you a little lunch, and then put you out on the zip lines in the afternoon.
Can we do the reverse?
Yeah, please.
You know, we don't have showers. Sorry, we don't have showers in the museum.
Right.
Okay, but anyway, the other thing I wanted to point out is we did the only museum in the country, we did win from NASA the ability to put up our own satellite. We're still looking for funding on that. I'm not coming here for that funding. But what we will do is we will be able to bring actual space data into the mission control, where we've just upgraded all the hardware and software, and allow the students to be dealing with new actual space data experience. The satellite crashes, we've got a hot air balloon and a submarine that we could send some signals through, so we've got backup plans. Asset number 2 is the Henry DuPont III Planetarium. We've just finished an upgrade to the planetarium, new digital projectors, new sound, lighting is going in right now. We still have to upgrade the seating and the carpeting and some other things. A number of new shows. Again, all available to Fairfield students that are in the program, funded by this $24,000 we see. Okay, as I said, 2,000 students roughly. The demand is higher than that, but we're looking to just keep the budget flat. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your service. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that your wife, Mrs. Helen Devanza, she actually knows what it's like to be up here, because she did it for a number of years. She really feels our pain.
And I should point out that Ms. Devanzo is the current town treasurer.
All right, so she's actually spending the money.
I'm going to go deal over here then.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll go to budget number 2190, the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, page 137. Budget is flat year over year. Questions, comments on this budget?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms. McCarthy-Bay. Go ahead.
I'll defer to the first selectman. He may answer some of my questions.
I just wanted to point out some quick highlights I think you've heard about over the last couple of years especially, but we've been working with the GBRC on putting together a natural hazard mitigation program that we need in order to help the residents in our beach area get hazard mitigation grants to fund the elevation of their homes, and that's been very well publicized over the last couple of months in terms of the trials and tribulations of getting that through the state. But it starts with a hazard mitigation plan that GBRC helped us put together because we didn't have the resources or the skill set to do that. That leads right into the community rating system that basically, allows our residents to get discounts on flood insurance, again, that live in the beach area, get between 5 and 10% along that. They're also working on putting together a regional GIS system you've heard referenced by our IT manager as well as our engineering group, and that's saving us real money that we couldn't otherwise put together. We'd have to fund our own going forward. They've helped put together economic development brochures for our community. They've been part of the Fairfield Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan and helping put that, support that. They provided support services for the Fairfield Metro Center work that we did and the intersection improvements that you heard a lot about during that time period. They were part of the Commerce Drive area streetscape improvements, the $1.2 million grant we just got recently. Mill Plain Road Bridge replacement, congestion management traffic studies on Black Rock Turnpike and US 1, traffic signal needs assessment, and various technical assistance beyond that. I'm only mentioning all those because they don't get a lot of time in front of us. They don't get a lot of time in the spotlight. A lot of times you'll see these grants come through and you'll hear that it's a federal grant or state grant. You won't see the GBRC folks. So I just wanted to point out they're extremely valuable in terms of what's taking place and really providing us a good regional perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy?
Thank you. And I would concur. I think they're a great bargain for our community for all the things that they do. And while we may not see them here, they're behind the scenes and they're at all the planning and prep meetings getting things to us here. My question is this. With the regionalization conversations happening, where do things stand now? And I don't know if folks are familiar with that. How might that impact our budgeting? And I don't know if that's
Meg,
to
do you
the
want me to
first
answer that, or do you
selectman.
want to?
How about if you start? I mean,
Okay.
you may be a little bit more up to date than me if there were any recent developments today.
Yeah, very good. There's been a statewide initiative to consolidate some of the planning organizations. So we've kind of done that in 2 steps. About, I'm going to say 2 or 3 months ago, we went through and kind of transformed what we're called and got approval from the RTM to be called a COG, or Council of Governments. Didn't change anything. It changed the label, and that makes us more compatible to the state guidelines from that standpoint. In addition to that, there's been a move by the state to consolidate these COGs, or planning organizations. We are currently big enough, and under the current plans, looking to kind of stay on our own as the Greater Bridgeport Regional COG, if you will. We've been working together very well. We're very pleased with that. We've been very effective in getting grants, and some of the items I described are certainly regional programs we've been able to participate in. So we're very happy being left alone at this point. But I'll turn it over to you from there.
I agree with you, First Selectman, that we think we're most likely going to be left alone. It looked like it was approved by the state, so.
Yeah. And again, just to be clear, one of the reasons I am kind of jumping in here is we get together once a month as the 6 First Selectmen and mayors from the group, so we're pretty hands-on and pretty involved as we go through this from a planning level at that standpoint.
Our board is made up of the the 6 CEOs for the region.
So to clarify, I'm hearing that it's probably approved or it is approved. So are we definitely remaining as GBRC, or is there a final approval that we're waiting to?
For right now, we're staying as our COG. I don't know if there's been final sign-off at the state level yet,
I'm not sure. I can clarify that, though.
That would be great.
but the state moves slowly in some of these regards.
Okay. And can you also introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Megan Sloan. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Becker?
Thank you. So isn't this, I mean, we put this under the nonprofits, but this is more of a membership type item into an organization, like a CCM or a conference of mayors, I mean, something like that in theory? Because those are all nonprofits.
First of all, I think that the not-for-profit term, category, label, totally inaccurate and totally inappropriate. Tax-wise, for many cases, that may be correct, but you know, it gives the wrong impression. We're not making donations to this group. We're a part of it. It's active. We're contributing a membership fee, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
but they're basically a funnel to us for state and federal funds. When we get federal money for transportation projects, be it road paving, sidewalks, whatever, a lot of times it's coming through GBRC to get to us. So you're correct.
Yeah, and the other, I mean, like, the other ones are under your budget, under memberships, things like that, or like CCM, places like that. Essentially, we're members of them, we pay some sort of component, however you want to kind of word that, and then we get a lot of services from them or
Yeah,
benefits.
this is a much more active group for channeling money. If they didn't exist,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be getting the grants we get.
Okay, yeah.
The other way to look at that, I focused in my comments on a lot of what I'll call Fairfield specific, which is really the filter I used on looking at the organizations in this category, trying to come up with a word that's not-for-profit, or not-for-profit. But in this case, there also are some regional benefit. When we look at Metro North, they become one of our voices for talking about Metro North, the highway system, where we work together as a group.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page here. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to Budget 2210, the Audubon Society. It's flat at $15,000. Questions, comments on this budget?
Just to comment again, this is one of the organizations that, because they're intertwined with the school curriculum, that would look either to put in their own category group or to move over to the Board of Ed budget as part of that. Again, with the dollars, not trying to get it, change that, but to allow them to participate in that. You can see from the analysis on page 140 that we contribute about $15,000 and get about just over $140,000 in return. So from an ROI standpoint, that's a pretty good investment.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra.
Just as a quick point, on page 125, all the categories are, all the, and I agree, not-for-profit's not the right thing, even though they're all listed, and we've made an attempt to categorize them, and you'll see the ones that say education next to them, Mill River, Audubon, they're all in there, so for future reference.
And we can take a shot at a little bit better organization and addressing.
Yep, that was one of our recommendations.
I believe Mr. Nelson North is here if we had any specific questions about Audubon.
Okay. Do we have anything? Come on up if you want to speak. Anybody have anything? Seeing none, we'll turn it over to the public. Welcome. Please go right ahead.
Well, I just, excuse me, thank you for entertaining our level ask, and we do the best we can with it. It's been a challenging year, as all years are, but we fully expect to be able to deliver the science-based education programs to the 2,300 some odd kids in grades K, 1, and 2, and also maintain the sanctuaries with the trails for challenged individuals for the town of Fairfield.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority, 2230. That's on page 142 through 144. And it's $30,000, and it's flat year over year. Questions, comments from board members?
Again, in this case, I'd point you to the handout, I think was distributed at GBT. I was surprised in looking at this, at the number of ridership, and specifically those addressed to our seniors or disabled. This is kind of an integral part of our senior center transportation program. And again, if you look at, if they didn't exist, it would be hard to duplicate everything they do for $30,000.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Good evening.
Sure. My name is Doug Holcomb. I'm the General Manager of Greater Bridgeport Transit, and thanks for having us back and giving us an opportunity to share some thoughts on this and support the requests that we've made. It's the same as last year, the same as the last several years, and we depend heavily on the municipal contributions in addition to what we get from the state and some funding that we get from the federal government. So we continue to do the fixed route service. It's very productive. It's very efficient. We've worked hard in our own office to bring efficiencies everywhere we can. And the minibus service, the ADA service for riders with disabilities, that's also also very productive and growing and very important to the region. And we also have, as the First Selectman pointed out, been administering since 2006 a grant that comes to Fairfield from the State Department of Transportation for seniors. So those are the three core services that we're operating right now from our hub in Bridgeport.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Seeing no more questions from the board, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to Budget 2250, the Fairfield Museum and History Center, 145 through 147, $50,000 flat with prior years. Questions, comments from board members? Again, you could argue this is part education-based, but it does do arts and cultural across the town as well.
Yes, this is a mixed bag. I wouldn't necessarily recommend switching this one over because a large part of what they do is manage our historic sites.
Yep.
And that's, if you look, again, looking for ROI, kind of what's the payback. If you just look at the historic sites, it would cost us at least $50,000 to duplicate what they're doing there. It's almost like we get all the other services and programs they do for free coming off of that. They're a key part of our arts and culture. They attract visitors and dollars to Fairfield when we talk about kind of doing things for the economy. It's also our heritage, and as we look at this, if we don't fund the Fairfield Museum, kind of who will? You know, they're not going to get money from another town. And they've been just a phenomenal partner throughout all of this.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Questions, comments from the public, or comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Fairfield Veterans Advisory and Information Service Budget 2270, 148, 149, $3,400 flat over prior year.
Just to explain, if you read the description here, you'll see that this is really the director and Vanessa, you're here, yes, is here. Her job is to reach out to veterans, make sure they're getting all the services that are due them. And we sometimes think of veterans that are older from wars fought a while back. My brother, who has just come back, has kept me in touch with a lot of the stories about veterans coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and the help they need navigating their services and benefits back here when they get that. So this is our contribution to help facilitate that for veterans in Fairfield.
Great. Thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back? Okay, thank you. And thank you, and thank you for your service. All right. We'll go to 2290, Southwestern Connecticut EMS Council, $3,000, page 150 and 151. Questions, comments on this one? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. None, we're done with that one. Let's go to 2310, Southwest Regional Mental Health Board. This is on page 152 through 154. Got $9,500, 9475, flat year over year. Questions, comments on this budget? Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
I think this one is one that's come up in the past in terms of how it's connected. So I just want to point out a recent example of how their service has benefited us. The mental health first aid training was offered to town employees, and I believe that we had a few folks from our own HR department be able to take advantage of this service. So there are real benefits to the community.
Right. And the contribution or investment that we make here is targeted 15 cents per capita.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks to both of you. Any other questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll go on to the Council of Churches Janus Center, 2330, 155 through 156. It's a $5,000 contribution, flat with prior year. And Mr. DeWitt.
Just as a note, if you're following along on page 125, the next line item is Southwest Regional Communications Center. That budget is no longer in under miscellaneous. It's actually been moved to the ECC budget. So there's a corresponding line in the ECC if you're keeping track.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt.
All right.
Thank you, Mrs. Gardner, for telling
And
me.
if I might mention, as I was sitting down talking to the organizations in this section, it's hard to say not to say not-for-profit. I looked at the first thing I look for is, where's the overlap, what's taking place. The second thing is, frankly, this name popped off the charts at me. It said Council of Churches. What are we doing investing in that? And it's not until you kind of look under the hood and see what they're actually delivering. And I'd point you to the bottom of page 155, the last paragraph there, which for me sums up a lot of what is unique and different about this service. That they serve youth and families in Fairfield. There were 59 referrals that came to them from the Fairfield schools and other agencies. But they provided temporary respite care. That's a place for kids can go and stay there, and they provided 74 days of service. And one of the things that's unique about this is it's a place the kids can go. Sometimes when someone's in crisis, you need to get out of your house, you need someplace to go, you need someplace to be part of that. So that's one of the unique features or services that this group is providing along with that. They've requested $5,000, and if you look at the temporary respite care, the 59 referrals, the 7 folks who stayed there for 74 days in total, it would be hard to duplicate that kind of service for that price tag.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Any other questions, comments? All right, we'll move along. We'll go to Grassmere by the Sea, 2350. It's 157, 158, $65,000. Questions on this budget? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Anything on this public? Anything? Okay.
And just a little background on this, what should be in the handout that you got, again, towards the bottom of that first page, that when Grassmere, the Jewish Senior Center, Senior Services, took over this program, it was costing Fairfield $120,000 a year. They took it over on an agreement that was shortly revised and downward. So they were expecting more money from the town when they accepted this arrangement. They're down to $60,000, $65,000, and are still maintaining that level of service and improved it. So, again, when you look at the number of clients going through that, it comes out to about $5 per client per day, and from an ROI standpoint, again, that's a hard number to match someplace else.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go on to Budget 2370, the Sullivan McKinney Elder Housing, 159 through 160. Anybody? All right, anybody in the public? Seeing none, we're done with that.
There is an increase in this number, and that's purely because there's an ADA improvement to the interior of an elevator, so that should be a one-time number. It's not an increasing trend, it's just to address a capital need this year.
Yeah, we saw the write-up, I think. I saw somewhere on it. Kennedy Center, 2430, which is page 161 to 162. Anybody?
There was also a handout on this, and in simplest terms, there are 101 individuals in town that participate in programs in the Kennedy Center. Our contribution comes out to about $70 per participant per year to provide the transportation to the center and back. And again, we have looked at trying to duplicate that some other way. That would be difficult to do.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Anyone else? Seeing none, we're going to go to Mill River Wetland Committee, 2450, 163, 165. And this is one of those related to education. We talked about $5,000 flat year over year.
Yep. This would be a candidate for recategorizing into the Board of Ed.
Anybody else? Seeing none, we're going to go on to the Pilot House, 2470. This is $10,000, or rather the request was $10,000. It's back to $8,000, which is flat with the prior year. It's page 166 and 167.
And again, looking at the focus on Fairfield, I'd point out, as it says, that 92% of their participants are from the town of Fairfield.
Thank you. Does anybody want to comment from the public on this? Anything about the reduction from the request? It is flat with prior year. Nobody? Okay, we're done with the pilot house. Thank you very much. We'll go to 2480, the Center for Women and Children. This is pages 168 and 169, and this is flat with prior year. There was an increase in the request, but it was cut back to flat with prior year. Any questions on this? Good evening.
Good evening.
No questions from board members? Feel free. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mark Antonini. I am the Chief Financial Officer for the Center for Women and Families, which is now the Center for Family Justice.
Thank you for straightening that out, and can we make that change in our budget book? Thank you.
My name is Andrea Goodman. I'm the board chair.
And I'm Sarah Lubarski. I'm a Fairfield resident, but I work at the Center for Family Justice. I'm the Director of Development and Community Outreach.
Welcome.
Being that it is so late, I mean, we don't want to keep you. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave you with a packet of information. Is that okay?
Absolutely,
Okay.
and this feels like halftime to us, by the way.
We're happy to entertain. We're very happy to entertain any questions and really appreciate all of the support. I know I see a lot of the support right here in this room, which has been terrific. Thank you so much.
Great. Anything?
Any questions?
Oh, if I might just take a minute or two. First of all, thank you to the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, for your time tonight. I would just like to say a few things about the Center for Family Justice. We are a very unique organization that is really adopting a best practice model in becoming a family justice center, which basically means that all the services we have offered, we will continue to offer. However, we will be offering more service, multidisciplinary services under one roof. The implications for residents in the town of Fairfield are really hugely positive. We are leading the way among 26 other domestic violence and sexual assault centers in this state. And to offer these services under one roof, we believe will really strengthen our clients. So when they have, when they're able to talk to a police officer, a prosecuting attorney, have mental health services, wellness services, all under one roof, it is best for them. It saves, ideally, long-term, it will save money. To the town. They will be stronger and more resilient, so the level of recantations will drop. So that, I mean, of all the programs, of all the initiatives the center's taking, that is far and away the most significant. But I will also say, we have vigils every year in Fairfield. We have an initiative that is spearheaded by Gary McNamara, the Chief of Police in Fairfield, to walk a mile in her shoes. And we're very, very excited to be bringing more men and boys in dealing with the problem of sexual and domestic violence, and really are paving the way to help, I think, residents in this town see it as a human problem, not specifically a woman's issue. In addition, we probably serve close to 300 individuals in this town and over 2,000 with regard to, you know, our prevention, community education work. So it's very exciting to me as a representative of the board and our staff that the work we do not only serves clients after they have been abused, but that we continue to work with children as young as preschool age. In our library, one or two such programs have occurred in our library, but we continue to really help families in this town raise young children who will be self-respecting and respecting of those around them. So, you know, I want to be very respectful of your time. There are many programs we do, but these are few of the highlights and some of our major initiatives. And I don't know if you want to add something.
No? No? You've said it all?
Yep,
Thank
if-
you so
if
much.
I could-
Thank you so much for the support that you have given us over the years.
If I could just piggyback on what was said there, they talked about a name change, but it's much more than that. Having had a chance to sit through a case study on what it took a domestic violence victim in San Diego to report her crime, go to all the different stops, it was like 15 stops in more than one building to get through of just reporting everything that you had to get to the right people to get things taken care of. By bringing it all together, that literally is one-stop shopping in the best of cases to help people get the service they need as soon as they can. So it's not just a name change, it's a dramatic restructuring of what it takes to get people into the system, get them help when they're most vulnerable, and most needed. So my compliments to you taking the initiative in terms of getting that here in Fairfield for our residents.
Thank you, Mike. We knew you
Can't
could
do it
count on you
without you.
guys.
Thanks.
Really. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thanks for staying so late tonight. Appreciate that. Any other questions and comments? Seeing none, that is it. That is our last budget, and our joint hearings are over. Thursday evening, there'll be the Board of Finance only. One thing I do want to do on Thursday evening, Mr. Mayor, if you would be so inclined to be able to talk about revenue that night, because there's some revenue lines that we did not get to that we should go over on Thursday evening. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Can I have a motion? Yes.
Do we have any, I won't even ask it. We still have a couple open actions, I think, from the Finance Department. I know one from executive session, especially.
Yes, that I have not had a follow-up on, that I'd like.
So what?
And Mr.
what do-
Tetra,
Other
you
than
owe me
that
on that.
one, do we have any other follow-up
That's
that we
with you.
need to
You
have
said
for
you wanted to
Thursday?
talk about that. Any other?
So we can have all of our stuff by
That's my goal.
Thursday? Is that the goal?
I don't know that it'll be all by Thursday, that's up to them. It'll certainly be before we vote.
Yeah, we did, took a survey of everything that was asked for, and
Mr.
And-
DeWitt is right, there's one item.
there's one item that seems to be pressing, and
That's
there's
the only
another
one I
one
can recollect. I
tonight.
didn't know if there
Yeah.
were any. Okay.
There's some others that are more long-term, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeWitt, for reminding us. Do I have a motion? Mr. DeWitt, do I have a second? Mr. Stone, all in favor of adjournment? All opposed? Good night, everybody.